town.
Sure.
80% of it.
That's really the whole point of it.
Well, being in education for 35 plus years.
You know what time
And I
it is,
missed
yeah.
what school were you
I'm
teaching?
just afraid that for some people it would hold it back. I would hope it wouldn't, but.
I don't know.
I was
that
only
it's held
kidding about the
anything back.
5-minute speech. It's like just your name and like, you know, a sentence will do.
Like, I just want to serve on the age-friendly committee because,
Nobody can really tell us that.
right.
Okay.
What school did you work for?
I started in Augusta at Farrington.
Oh, nice.
And then had children, stayed home for 6 years, and then went to Gardner. I was in West Gardner and finally ended up at LER. Laurie Richards on Brunswick Avenue. That was my home for 22 years.
Wow.
It's 6:30 in Readfield, Maine. Please stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was not trying to place
I
face
was
plant in
waiting
my
to-
chair.
I had your back. Don't worry, I had your back. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 13th of March, 2023, and this is the regular meeting of the Readfield Select Board. As always, I like to remind all of the board members, if you have an opportunity, as we are being Zoomed, recorded, and then later back posted on YouTube, please speak loudly and directly into your microphones for everyone. We appreciate it. We begin with our regular meeting items. 23089 are the minutes from the select board meeting of February 27th. I would entertain a motion to approve these minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of February 27th with no changes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, I believe by Carol, to approve these minutes of February 27th with 0 changes, batting 1,000. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? As always, thank you, Angelica. Item 23090 are warrants 35 and 36. We turn our attention to Carol Dorenbos as she tells us a little bit about them.
So warrant 35 includes $377,271 to various vendors, including Atlantic Recycling. There's a fee of $6,800 for Cartographic Associates. I didn't know what that was. But Eric explained that it's updating our tax maps into digital form. So to make things easier to access and maybe easier to change down the road. There was $349 for Baker and Taylor for books. There was our regional school unit, $309,000. Scott Horn, $44,800. And just a bunch of other miscellaneous, nothing really stood out except that one cardiographic that I didn't know what it was. And then it also included state fees in the amount of $1,491 and more state fees in the amount of $3,202. And then warrant 36 included, that was in payroll, $21,354. So grand total for warrants 35 and 36 is $398,626.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
I would entertain a motion to approve this warrant.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve warrants 35 and 36 in the, oh boy, hang on. In the amount, I am scrolling, sorry, of $398,626.12. Is there any further discussion? Very well. All in favor? Thank you very much. We now move to our next item, which is item, I'm sorry, I clicked out of it there. Item communications. And before we do that, right, yes, we're gonna, if it pleases the board, we are going to suspend our communications for just a second while we say hello to our nominee for the age-friendly committee. Come on up there to the podium and say hello to Deb Carey, who is now on, has her application before us. Deb, if you want to give us, just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us and just begin.
Yeah, it was so funny. I was at the post office this morning. I was telling everyone knows Justine.
about my plans. And she said, I said, what do I say, Justine? She says, well, just tell them that you have a lot of age and you're friendly, so you belong on that committee. So I laughed at that. She's brings me so much joy. But anyway, I'm a retired teacher, starting a new chapter in my life, and I've lived in Readfield for 42 years, and during that time raised our girls here, my husband and I, Alan, who passed away a year and a half ago. And so I'm finding that I'm starting a new chapter. So I would like to get involved in the age friendly committee and make a difference in the community in the best way that I can. And I'm really excited about it. I went to my first meeting, and everyone was very welcoming, and it's a really exciting, youthful for being an age friendly committee to be joining. So a lot of exciting ideas there, and really excited to be a part of the Neighbors Driving Neighbors Committee, which I thought, I'd like to become a part of as well. So
yeah, it's a great program.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Any members of the board have questions for Deb?
No, I'd just like to make a motion to accept Deb Carey's appointment to the Age Friendly Committee from a time starting today through June 30th, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Deb Carey to the Age Friendly Committee. Is there any further discussion? Very well. All in favor? Deb, thank you so much. It's nice to have folks on that committee that are dedicated to Readfield and the betterment of our entire community. Thank you. You may go or you may stay. It's up to you. It doesn't get any more interesting than that. We move on now. Thank you, board, also to select board communications. Any member of the select board may use this time, 5 minutes, to address the public.
Well, I'll just say it one more time. Wow, the sidewalks in Readfield are getting cleared and looking awesome. I drive through Augusta, and sorry for those of you who work in Augusta, but they're not getting them cleared. When they do clear them, they're not cleared down to the pavement. Our maintenance crew is just doing a fantastic job, and here they are working here as well. So just a big shout out to maintenance.
Excellent. I always like to hear shout outs to maintenance, folks working for us. Anyone else?
I guess this is on that same vein that I had asked about the sand. I honestly didn't see if it was moved towards a more accessible place. I think
You
I
mean
saw
the transfer station,
the
right?
transfer station.
Oh, yeah.
Catherine, are you on the board there? Is that something you can bring up to
No, that would be
Karen?
up to the transfer station manager.
Okay.
So Eric, do you know, did you talk to Karen about that at all?
I hadn't, because we've had some challenges getting things out to the road in a way that isn't unsafe.
Okay.
We might be able to put out like a barrel or something, but then we'd have to worry about people taking it from other towns. So we certainly have it available, all the time, with rare exception when the transfer station is open. And again, I think we had ended that we weren't intending for that to be used for commercial purposes, but just for residents. And if we have someone that does come in and needs material, they could have someone, a friend or a neighbor, come in, and we'd be happy to provide sand to them. So we just haven't moved that forward, in part because of the logistics of it. But if the board wants to look at maybe a different arrangement, we definitely can't allow people to have access into the salt sand shed because of the contractor equipment that exists there and things like that.
Yeah.
What would the possibility be of putting a barrel on its side here at the town office?
I mean, we could do that, yeah.
And if it disappears overnight, then obviously somebody came and took it all.
Yeah.
And so then that doesn't work. But maybe we could do it that way. And I know do we still keep some barrels outside, buckets outside, the Age Friendly Committee does outside here, so that they can take them to someone who calls?
In the lobby, yeah, or in the back of the building. We don't have any out in front
Right.
anymore, but we do have those available. So if people need it, we can have it delivered through the Age Friendly Handy Helpers Initiative.
Well, I understand what Carol's saying, and Carol, I'll bring it up and put it on our agenda for our solid waste committee meeting in April, which won't help for right now,
Right.
but at least we can make a plan, with all 3 towns for how we can approach that for next year. But I I can see what the issue is. It's like it snows tomorrow.
Mhm.
What's today? Monday. So
Monday.
it snows on a Tuesday and the transfer station might be closed. Are we closed tomorrow?
We are.
We are because the state is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so somebody needs sand tomorrow because it's snowing tomorrow and they want to clean up but you can't access it.
Yeah.
And then Wednesday you can access it, but not in the morning. And so,
You might not be able to get out to access it, you know, so.
right. So I can see what the conundrum is. We don't want to provide it for everyone in Kennebec County. But I think if we just had a smaller barrel here, then that whole
Yeah.
covered shed, it might be a solution.
Yeah. In some way, I agree. I think having it, I think it is a good idea to have it even when the transfer station isn't open. I know that happens in a town that I work in and it's very much appreciated. So any little thing we could do, I think.
And if it's here, maybe people wouldn't be quite as apt to come and fill up a pickup truck of it as opposed to putting it at the end of the transfer
Yeah,
station road.
Great idea. Yeah.
And the person hasn't asked did it happen, but I perceive with the
No, but it's
Amen.
storm
Well,
coming,
you never
maybe
know.
they would, and I didn't see anything when
Oh,
I was
that's
there. the other
good.
day. Thank you.
good to be persistent.
Absolutely. Very well. Any other members of the board? Good. We will move on now to staff reports. We have 10 minutes set aside for the town manager's report and the treasurer's report from February. Eric?
Thanks, Dennis. I'll be
Yes,
quick. It's been a busy month with the comprehensive plan and budget. Those are taking a lot of precedence as we try to push other things forward at the same time. As far as administration goes, I did mention those two items as being the top priorities currently. We are finishing up employee evaluations. I started last week. I should be done this week. And that's a very important process for us to really spend a lot of time talking to our staff about how great they are. So I really enjoy that. If you haven't taken a community survey yet, please do. We do want to get as much feedback as possible on that comprehensive plan survey. We're hoping to have those wrapped up fully by the end of the month. We have a budget and warrant public hearing on March 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And I wanted to note the storm closure tomorrow. Again, this is not because we chose to close. The state offices closed, and we have a contract provision that we're hopefully going to negotiate that says that if the state offices close, the town of Readfield closes. So wanting to improve the situation, but we are closed tomorrow, library, transfer station, and town office. Roads, traffic, parking, and safety, winter road plowing and treatment has been ongoing. We are using a lot of material, but we've been able to keep up with it. We've had adequate salt and sand supply, and the results, as Catherine noted, have been pretty exceptional. We've had universal praise for the staff in their job and our contractors in their job in keeping the roads clean. There's always mailboxes, but again, they're working to make sure those get replaced if appropriate. Spring heavy load limits remain in place and will. Folks are allowed to travel on the roads with excessive weights, provided the road is solidly frozen. So that's always in place. But if the roads are not frozen, if there's water showing, if it's above 32 degrees, loads are limited and folks should request permission before traveling on them with vehicles and loads combined weighing more than 23,000 pounds. And then roadwork RFPs will be issued for the spring and summer projects in March. Moving on to maintenance and transfer station, the F550 has had a series of electrical issues that are being addressed. We had to replace the key cylinder today, and there's been a few other things that we're getting closer to being more sure of what the issue is, but we work with Cork Ford and they're helping to diagnose what those issues are. And we are working with Maine DEP on a spring composting event and activities. That's really the transfer station. And we're excited about that because the more we compost, the more money we save and the better the results for everything, including the soil that we get to give back to our residents. So that is my manager's report.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And treasurer,
Please,
if you don't mind.
let's hear it.
All right, so check reconciliation was completed through February 28th, 2023. Our accounts are in balance with our bank statements. We did have normal activity except for one anomaly where we had an entry that was repeated, an electronic payment that came through twice, and then someone issued a check and they then put a stop payment on the check. And so there is a little bit of funkiness there that we're trying to sort out with the bank. Basically, there's more money showing than was actually received. So we have to sort that out. The audit is ongoing, and I'm hoping to get that sorted out within the next month or so. We were hoping to have more information for the budget process. We have what we need, but it's always good to have that audit wrapped up so we can have confidence around it. The budget process is in its final stages, and we have a public hearing again on March 22nd at 6:30 p.m. For discussion. Comments on this month's report. We should be at about 67% for revenues and expenditures. Real estate payments are up slightly for the month and for the year to date. So that's good. Folks are running ahead. That does show a little bit more willingness and ability to pay, that we're running ahead like that. So we always like to see that. We also have transfer station revenues that are showing high for the month, but still below yearly average. We believe that's due to the fact that we had just increased prices in January to account for the significant increases in costs that we're facing from our vendors and suppliers and the like. And then capital expenses, the cost of road maintenance account for the bulk of the increases that we've seen in that area, both revenue increases for capital and operating costs. Also, revenues and expenses are running close to budgeted for the year. So everything's looking good, and I'm happy to take any questions on the finances at this point.
Anybody have any questions for the treasurer's report as included in the website?
Just a point of clarity for myself. We do have a meeting on Wednesday night with the school board about the budget process,
yes.
correct?
That is for the select board. Other members of the public are welcome, but yeah, 6:30 p.m. At the middle school, I believe. And Zoom is also available. Folks should be, even if they're not participating actively, at least observing that. Because the school does account for roughly 75–77% of the out-of-pocket tax impact
that we know of
on an annual basis.
I have that's at 6 o'clock.
Oh, 6 o'clock. Sorry, I misspoke.
And I think,
Hang on, wait. That's
I
a good
think
question.
their annual audit report is also on the agenda for the first part of the meeting, which is like a half an hour or so. If you
I
don't
have
get there right on
6:30.
time.
You have 6. Let me just double check.
Oh, I got the town website here somewhere.
And I apologize to anybody.
have
I'm
Wi-Fi
not
on the
really on
plane,
my
Steve.
phone. I can't get the packet to download to my computer, so I'm using it on my phone.
We forgive you.
I'm not like texting folks.
6:30.
6:30.
That's usual. It's usually 6:30.
6:30.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I hate that.
Thank
And do we know, do they still meet in the downstairs of the middle school?
Yeah,
it's in
cafeteria.
the-
Yeah, right off the parking lot there.
Is that the middle school cafeteria or the
That's the
cafeteria?
middle school,
Okay,
in the lower parking lot.
great.
Yes. All right. Any other
Thank you.
questions about that? Good. Thank you for reminding us of that. We moved now to boards, committees, commissions, and departments. We had submissions for boards, committees, commission minutes from the Budget Committee, the Cemetery Committee, the Planning Board, and the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee. Any comment before we say thank you? Excellent. We now move to public communication. If the public would like to address, anyone online as well is also able, if you would be, I see Greg Durgan there. We'll take you, Greg. And if there's any other folks online. Okay. Just think it's Greg, and then we'll move here. Okay. Thank you, Greg. You can go ahead if you are ready. If not, all right. You are on mute. So I just want to remind you of that. There we go.
How about now?
There we go. Yes,
Hey,
sir. You are live. Yes, sir.
Technology, and people think I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, come on. I heard Steve laughing.
Not
Yeah.
laughing at myself, Greg.
Okay, all right.
Very similar in that regard.
Hi, Greg Durgan, Route 41 South here in Readfield resident. I'm also on the comp plan, and that's what I'd kind of like to address tonight, if I could, for a brief 3 or 4 minutes.
You got it.
Recently, like many others in town, I received a diatribe in the mail that had some strong accusations about members of the comp plan, the town manager, select board chair, et cetera, et cetera. I'm on that comp plan, And those meetings have been open, they've been public, they've been broadcast. There are official minutes taken by a non-committee member. They're dispersed on the website. We've had 2 open meetings on Saturdays for people to give their input. The minutes go out to all the committees that want them, such as the Trails Committee and the Conservation Commission. I'm appalled that this is still going on. There is no conspiracy. People like Dennis and Matt Nazar and Eric, of course, Paula Clark. These are, I'm talking to everybody now, not just as like, these are good people that are volunteering their time. It's run by KV Cog. Those people from KV Cog have no issues with any residents in our town. They're there doing a job. Yes, they're paid. It's a comp plan review that happens every 10 years. That comp plan committee is not out after anybody. It's a review that reviews everything from open space to the number of popsicles we give out on Heritage Days, for crying out loud. I'm just appalled that that continues. I understand that maybe members don't want to respond to that legally or whatever, but and I don't have an axe to grind, except I'm tired of these diatribes that just attack our town officials and committee members. That's all I've got to say. And people on that committee, I associate with them. They're good people. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. We appreciate that. Thank you.
On comment on that?
A comment on a public comment?
Just,
Sure.
well,
Quickly, yeah, yeah.
because I had asked at the comprehensive plan meeting if we could have, so I know we've like had professionals help us put it together and there's stuff that's been put together. Can that be available before, I think the next meeting is in 2 days, but before the April, I mean, we just keep having these conversations, but we don't know what's in it. And maybe that's part of the mystery around it. Is there some way, I think you said it has been in like meeting notes, but can we pull that together at least before, like way before the April meeting where we can look to see what's in it?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole process is iterative. So as pieces are developed, they're presented and discussed in context. So there is no full plan draft yet. We're pulling together and actually discussing again the goals, policies, and strategies. Once that's complete, those will be uploaded. So it is an iterative process. And the reason there's no final document is because there is no final document. It's in development. And everything that has been discussed and is available is on the website. And we are working to make sure that as we get those pieces together and ready, they get up there as soon as possible.
But they're in comp plan meeting minutes?
Well, if you go online to the comprehensive plan and to the left is there's an area where you can get every document that exists as it is right now.
All the update.
Yeah, and I just put that on the Facebook page in case folks
Okay.
are following
Thank
along
you,
at home.
'cause I did
So that
that.
way, yeah, you can get every bit of the comprehensive plan you want right there on that.
But to Carol's final question, I think you addressed it prior to the meeting in April. Is that like the public hearing?
Yeah.
The last public
It will be published.
Oh, absolutely.
A draft.
Yeah, we will have to, and we've been working towards this final draft. It's just not a final draft yet. So it's problematic to put up things that are partially done unless they're part of the minutes and agenda for a particular meeting. We don't want those to show as being complete when they're not. They are available publicly for review, but we just don't have a final document yet. But that's part of the plan and part of that schedule that was discussed at the select board meeting 1 or 2 times ago.
And that plan, I hate to interrupt again, but that plan will be approved by the residents who go and vote.
Yep.
Right. Well,
That's it.
you don't have to go to vote, but who vote, either by
You can
mail or,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the people. That's
Thank you, Catherine. By people who
You got it. Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you,
If-
Catherine. Good night.
You're welcome,
Don't eat my
Greg.
dinner.
So
Not yet.
if
No,
there's
I got
anyone
one.
else here, thank you, that wants to address the select board, you are welcome. But I want to make sure that we understand that we will have 3 minutes, just like everyone else. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. Robert, I'm going to tell you that as a part, I want you to understand that as a part of your bail conditions, you being here is a courtesy. Yes, you understand that? I want to make sure it's on the record as a part of this legal meeting. I would
Thank you
also
very
ask
much
for you,
Dennis.
I would also ask for this point of courtesy. You talk right to me.
I'm talking to you, Dennis.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Greg Durgan, I respect him, all the work he's done. He's been on many committees and many of the other people in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan placed on the table when I arrived information. There's been nothing on their website that was available. And I've been looking regularly. Maybe it's available now, but the information on the website said that they were developing a plan for a community center. I've looked at community centers. They cost $5 to $7 million. We have one here. It's an extraordinary suggestion that the town would be developing a plan for one and then destroying one that exists already. Yes, and it's legal. And that's the problem that exists. Now, when I spoke about some of these things that existed before, if that information is available and it hasn't been to date, maybe now it is, but it hasn't been available. And I've asked many, many times for actual information where it may be available. If we destroy the community center that we've built already, if we do that, it is a great tragedy for this town. And I will be able to leave this town, and I will, and maybe to the joy of a lot of people, but I will. And I will close everything that I have because it has no life for me any longer. And it will remain closed forever. And this is the sadness I have. Yes, Dennis is looking at his watch to remind me that there are 3 minutes. How many minutes left, Dennis? So
I'll give you 1 minute, sir.
1 minute. One
1
minute
minute.
to say to this town, I love this town. I've worked very hard in this town. I put my fortune in this town, and I will bury it here along with my wife. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. If there's any other members of the public that would like to speak, you have this opportunity. Anyone online?
I'm done.
Thank you very much. What's that? Thank you.
Yeah, take care. Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Hi,
Greg.
Greg.
Thanks.
We
Greg.
move on now to our next item of business, which is, oh, I have to go back. Yes, the budget and warrant review. But
Item 23-077.
Woohoo. Item 23-077 is to review where we are so far. I wanted to point out that we are not, this is not an approval. This is just basically updating us on the process so far. Eric, do you want to give us a little bit of information about that?
Sure, yeah. So we have been working on this budget since really December, arguably November, through a public process, alternating in large part between public meetings with the budget committee and public meetings with the select board, where we review and consider various components of what our annual expenditures and revenues. And I want to make sure those points are clear. It's both expenditures and revenues show for the coming fiscal year. And we then include those in the form of the town meeting warrant. And it's important to note that that warrant isn't the final version. We basically move from a budget document that looks like, well, is multiple spreadsheet pages or an access type database and move that into the written warrant, which is the 40 or 50 questions, however many we typically have, usually around 40. And then that is moved subsequently into the secret ballot that we vote with. And so that's the process that we go through. That's the process we've been in so far. And I can go through some of the changes that we've seen between the last time the select board met and now. Some of which have happened even since we had the budget committee meeting last week, because things change very quickly during this time of year. But before I do that, I wanted to just make a note about the brief memo that I included in the select board packet, attempting to address kind of the question about what items are broken out and what aren't. As I noted, we do have this format and this process, and when the town voted to move to a secret ballot process, they did essentially give more discretion to the select board by choice. And the board has that discretion, has the ability to use it to set the warrant in a way that they believe is the best to present the information, find efficiency, make it understandable. I'm having a hard time hearing. I would like to offer that as an option, that the select board could easily put together a policy statement on when and how articles are broken out individually. Typically, they're put together by department. But if there is discussion, which there has been, around which articles should be included, which shouldn't be as individual items, it would be my preference that the board do it by a policy statement as opposed to by just an arbitrary decision on, not that it would be arbitrary, but I think that if you're going to be approaching this issue and question of which capital items or which, even the nonprofit agencies, some of them are combined, some of them aren't, you should have a policy for when and how that happens. So what I am suggesting is perhaps take the $50,000 number that I put in there and discuss it, choose which one you'd like. But we're dealing with large expenditures. And so I felt that a $50,000 threshold for any new expenditure would be appropriate, or an increase of $50,000.
Yeah.
So this was just an attempt to try to answer some of the questions that have been raised on the board.
Yeah.
And historically too, this isn't the first time we've had this discussion.
Right.
And every time we do, it seems to cause a little bit of friction. And I want to find a way past that. And I think a policy-based approach is the best way to go.
That seems like it's always served us well in the past. So what you, just to clarify, what your note said would be, any new expenditure above $50,000 would be a separated item. Right?
Yeah,
Could be.
Could
Or any item that changes, hey Joe, any item that changes over above $50,000 would also be, and so that could be an existing one that maybe was grouped before, but if we're talking about raising it more than 50,000, it has to be out on its own as a kind of condition of this proposed policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could
Just want
be,
to make
not
sure.
has to be.
Yeah.
Could be.
And it could be
Oh, the way it's written.
25,000, it could be 10, it could, I mean, I think.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what, but I think that
Yeah.
speaks to a question I would have for you, Eric, is, and again, I apologize, first time through this, but if we set the threshold at 50,000 and then say, well, what about 25,000, is that, I think we have to strike a balance between making the ballot not like an encyclopedia and making it so that people can have a say in the things that are the big issues, right? So can we, can you give me an idea, like, so let's say the threshold was 50,000 in this year's budget, how many items would that be? If it was 25,000, would it be a significant increase in the number of
Well,
issues?
we're
or would it
talking
be?
about capital expenses, right?
Yes. Yeah.
This is just in
Well,
capital. So
Just
it's
in-
not every expense we do.
Currently
Right.
just in capital,
Right.
yes. Yep. And I can look at that and I can give you a quick run through what that might look like. So capital improvements, we have a fire department, 623,000. That meets the threshold.
Yes, it does.
I will say that that is, and Dennis, when I can stop at any time if Joe would like to talk about the county budget. I don't want to.
You absolutely
Okay.
gotcha. I got you.
All right.
We'll let him get comfortable.
All right.
Settle it.
So that one would meet the threshold, but also because it's subject to a bond, it would be automatically its own article anyway. So
Anyway,
anything
right,
subject to
okay.
bonding automatically has a kind of a separate vote
Got
per state law, and we stick to that. Guile Hall, $10,000, library building reserve, $5,000. Those would be under the threshold. Open space would not be, or it would be on the cusp. Two things, it was on for 50,000 last year, so I'd say it wouldn't meet the criteria for new spending. and it wouldn't be an increase, so that one would not. Looking at cemetery 17.5, that one would not. Sidewalks would meet the threshold because it would be an increase from prior years, even though this was on the warrant 2 or 3 years ago, or 2 and 3 years ago. It's kind of back because we're looking at spending federal dollars as part of this 80-20 grant match that we have for the sidewalk project. So that one would meet. And then roads, 325,000. That I think is a small increase, maybe 25,000 more than the prior year. But that one wouldn't meet the $50,000 threshold. And then equipment leases would not, and transfer station would not, because we do have transfer station on every year. And last year it was also just about $60,000. So I think the idea behind this was to point out things that are new and impactful, and things that are just plain impactful. And so that threshold, if you went through that same exercise of 25,000, would add one article
Maybe
this
one
time around. But it could be different next time around. It's kind of like the purchasing policy.
Mhm.
You might want to look at it periodically, and it is that balance. So there we go.
Yep.
Go ahead, Carol. Yeah.
I cannot be more opposed to putting anything like this in writing that says there's a threshold that we have that can separate any expense out. There's several examples. Last year I was new to the board and I was just kind of learning. And I've done my homework, and something I have, it's from the MMA. Operating budgets typically are submitted by department heads to the Board of Selectmen, and then to be put in the warrant. And last year there was a whole bunch of things that somebody or one person or an employee talked to Eric, and it was in there. And I, like the library parking lot, for example, I went to Melissa and I said, we're gonna pave the library parking lot. And she said, oh, I didn't say it had to be now. I said it'd be nice someday. So it wasn't Melissa, it wasn't the librarian. I don't even think it was the library committee. It was somebody that said, oh, this would be nice. And it was kind of lumped into capital improvements, as was the windows in Guile Hall, which I went to Doug Riley, who was the engineer on the project years ago, who said they're good for 10 more years. And it was plumped into capital improvements. Open space went from $10,000 to $50,000 with zero discussion, with zero vote, and it was just slid into capital improvements. Open space, I've been told, is to retain the rural character of Readfield. I don't think we're at risk of losing that. I honestly don't. I'm gonna pass out something that I passed out at the comprehensive plan meeting that looks at our amount of open space that we have right now, which is 2,400 acres in the town of Readfield that we already have, which is almost an acre for every man, woman, and child in Readfield. And there's 2,500 people in Readfield. And that is not including the 8 cemeteries that we have, because there was no, let me find these. There was no listed acreage, and this information is from the town website. Sorry. So I just want to revisit how things are done in this town, because it seems a committee should be aware of what's going on in their budget. A committee needs to discuss it, the pros, the cons, and does the committee agree with it? As far as windows in the town hall, you're gonna have people that are cold. All over the VA, we have little space heaters because some people have a lower cold tolerance. That doesn't mean we spend tens of thousands of dollars on new windows. So I think the committees need to be involved. The committees need to bring it to the select board. It says the budget committee reviews it and puts it on the warrant. We're doing it backwards. Someone's going to Eric. Eric is going to the budget committee, and it's in there, and we are seeing the warrant and in its finality with no discussion. So even the things that are in here now, Guile Hall, what is $10,000 for? Even the ones this year, I'm like, I don't know what the $10,000 is for. Or the library, what's another 5,000? Or an open space. This is a capital improvement. I don't think it qualifies for that. Open spaces, we're going to buy real estate to set aside to do nothing with. It's not going to be developed. It's taking it out of the tax base. It's not going to be used for children or seniors or education or arts. It's set aside. It's just sitting there. And I think we have 24 plus acres, 100 acres that we already are responsible for. And let's do a good job with them. I don't think this day and age, $50,000 every year to acquire real estate. I don't think we should be speculating in real estate as a town. Period. So I would like that taken out into a warrant item of its own, just voting on, do we want every year to be spending $50,000 on open space? I don't even think people understand what that concept is. And I think all of these things could be in its own budget. I don't know what these are. I honestly don't. The transfer station, you said we spent $60,000 last year. What is $60,000 worth of capital improvements for this year? I don't know the background of any of these numbers.
So there's a lot there. Eric, do you want to try to address some
I'll give
of
a
it, or do we
quick
wanna
pass and just say that I'm sorry that you haven't been active in the budget process, but we do have an active budget process. The library, for example, was recommended by the library and then followed through by the budget committee. The budget committee recommended that. The select board then voted on the recommendations of the budget committee and vice versa for months. And we have a capital improvement plan that we look at annually and discuss all of these items. We did. I think you might have missed that one this year, but we do talk about these things in some detail. And I guess all I can say is that the way that things are done is in a way that is very transparent, that does give multiple votes and multiple layers of review, including public review, which is also very important. I guess I don't see a problem with the way the board has approached this. I think that there might be some decisions that the budget committee has made and recommended and the select board as a whole has made that you might disagree with. That's okay. That's part of what we do. But I do take issue a little bit with the fact that the process is some way things are being slid in or not voted on, because you voted on the budget last year and you may not have been fully aware of what you were voting on. It's impossible to some extent to be. That's why we have a budget committee to help with all that fine detail. And you have the option of being as involved or not as you'd like in reviewing that fundamental data. And just like any other resident, bringing that stuff forward for discussion. And you're doing a fine job, advocating for your positions here at the select board. So I appreciate that, but I do think that the process works. And I think it's worked well for the last 20 years, however long we've been doing this way. I guess the secret ballot probably started 10 years ago, Catherine, is that right? Which has changed things a little bit. If we had an on-floor town meeting, someone could ask and say, I don't understand this. What does this mean? We don't have that luxury anymore because the voters decided that they preferred the convenience and the privacy of a secret ballot vote. So we do the absolute best we can by having public hearings, making all of these meetings public, presenting this information on the website, and anybody that has questions can talk to me, talk to the budget committee. So I think it's a healthy concern, but I'd say that there's not much more that we can do to really make this clearer or more engaged. We have 20 budget meetings between the select board and the budget committee every year. And it's a lot of work, and it's almost, it's almost too much work. But we do our very best, and things come from all directions. People bring recommendations, ideas. One of the reasons why we update our budget documents the way we do is so that we can have a history of things that have changed. But again, with any budget, you have high level and then you have lower level detail. The very fine detail is almost exclusively looked at by the budget committee. The document that I put together, the summary document that has the division level. So you have department, division, expense, and object. Those are our four hierarchical tiers of expenditure and revenue. Those are we have to consolidate some of that. We work very hard to make sure that what we present isn't just a 58-page spreadsheet with thousands of numbers in it. So we do present that summary sheet that has just the department and division level. It has the charts and graphs, and all of that is just continually developed and repeated and presented. So I understand your concern. I think that there's a lot that goes into this, and I don't know what else to say, really.
In a rebut to that, so we had a meeting a couple months ago, maybe, that the select board, anything over $10,000 needs to come before us to be voted on and approved. We increased that to
No.
13,000. Let me
That's not
finish.
correct.
13,000 due to inflation. Okay. We have hardly voted as a unit on any expenditures there. And it seems like we are the ones that are elected. We're the ones that are supposed to be controlling the budget. The budget committee is not elected. Eric's not elected. I would like anything over that 13,000 thing that we agreed on to come to us by the committee head with a discussion, with a vote. And I guess I'm concerned why that's not the case. And even these, I mean, I don't know what I've been to each meeting. I went to the budget meeting the other night. And to be honest, I saw, okay, we're going to add 8,000 into grant writing because one person at the budget committee said, I think we need some professional grant writing so that we're more likely to get the money. And boom, there's 8,000 in the budget. I'm sorry, that's inappropriate. We're the ones with the purse strings. We're the ones that are elected. We're the ones that have to go back for re-election. I don't think one person bringing up, hey, I think this is a great idea, inflates our budget by thousands. I don't get it.
Catherine, go ahead.
Doesn't seem right.
Well, I want to clarify your last point to begin with. We authorize every single expense that is made by this town when we do these warrants.
Mhm.
So you can't say that we don't authorize the expenses that are made, which is what you said, because we authorize every single payment that's made. And it's not our job to set the budget, because in our town, we have an appointed budget committee, and that is their job to prepare the budget. The $13,000 is not for expenditures. That is a policy for whether or not a particular item has to be put out to bid to be responded on by at least 3 vendors. That's a vendor purchasing policy. It's not an expenditure policy, because we're not even expending anything with that policy. We're just asking for people, we need a new mower and it's going to cost $6,000. So do we have to get three different businesses at least to give us a quote on that? No, because our policy says anything under, is it 12,500?
I believe so now, yeah.
Says that we don't have to do that. But if that mower was going to cost $15,000, then yes, Eric would have to try and get at least 3 companies to give us a quote for that piece of equipment. But that doesn't allow us to buy it, because the only way we can buy it is to put it on the warrant and have the public say, yes, we want this money to be spent. And then we spend what the public has directed us to do by signing those warrants. So that's what that 13,000, which is 12,500 is. I was on the budget committee for 6 years in between being on the select board. And I just take personal offense to you saying that things are slipped in, that they're not discussed, because I know from 6 years of experience, that's not true. And I have sat in budget committee meetings virtually every year that I've been on the select board. And yes, somebody might make a suggestion. So if I make if you make a suggestion tonight about the open space plan, you're the one person saying it. So you're saying basically that we shouldn't pay any attention to that because it's just you talking about it. Well, that would be crazy, because we need to value your opinion and we need to discuss it. And then if we all agree just because you brought it up that we like it, then that's okay. Well, that's the same thing that happens on the budget committee. And we don't follow MMA's rules. We have our own town policies for how we do things. And in our town, we appoint a budget committee and they do a fantastic job every year. It's a tireless job. They meet for hours, 2 to 3 hours each meeting. They do it over a period of 2.5 months. They meet virtually every week. It's a tremendous responsibility. They listen to all the department heads. We only have one other department head. Is that correct, Eric, of maintenance?
Well, I mean, really, it's the transfer station, and we have all the boards and committees that present at their discretion. I mean, they
Right,
don't have to, but they have the
actual
option.
department heads,
Really, it's just transfer station.
it's just transfer
Yeah.
station. So that's the only department head who could report. And until this year, that department head was Eric, because he was head of the transfer
So
station.
we did push that out.
We did push that out.
To try to break it up.
And so Eric brings all of these things and he talks to his employees, he talks to the boards and committees, he talks to individual residents, and then he puts that all together and brings it to the budget committee and they dissect everything. And when I first started working on the select board about almost 20 years ago, we didn't have a capital improvement plan and we developed one. And it's a good plan. And if you read that plan, it'll tell you that that $5,000 for the library, I believe, is a reserve for maintenance, ongoing maintenance projects that may come up. So that when something does go wrong and we need to replace it, instead of having to raise $20,000, if we have 20,000 in savings for that building, we can spend it. And you know, you asked about that at our last meeting with the 75,000. Do we have any money to put towards this new fire truck? And Eric said, yes, we've been saving money. Well, that's what those kinds of things are in the capital improvement plan. When we say 5,000 for this or 10,000 for that, or 10,000 for the revaluation that's coming up, that it
It's
looks like we
25,
won't
but
have,
yeah, over
we
40.
won't have to take
Yeah.
money out of the current funds. So I'm very proud of the budget committee. There is nothing done by them that is slipped through or merely suggested by one person, never discussed and then slid in the budget. I just know that to be factual.
Sean?
Yeah, I just want to say, this is a lot. The budget stuff is a lot. There's a lot of detail, a lot of input. As someone that was the treasurer on a department before sitting here, you know, I took it very seriously coming to the budget committee and preparing what we hoped our budget would look like for the coming year for that department, so that it was very clear and we shared that information. I know that this year we have appointed 2 people. We appointed Chris Salmons and we reappointed Marty Hainish. I mean, the select board did that this year. And for me, the way I figured out the capital improvement spending is it's the town's savings account. It's our savings account for whatever project, like the windows. We know a window costs almost $3,000 at my house, so I'm sure that window costs a lot more. And so I'm thinking 10,000 a year for this savings account, so that when these gaskets all go and we do have to repair it and we have 200,000 for windows, then we're great. We're not going to raise the taxes $200,000 that one year to fix the windows. So I really appreciate our capital improvement plan in that regards. I think it puts us in great stead for when we're not sitting at this table.
But times are hard. People are hurting. We have to be good stewards of the money. Everybody has ideas of what they want. Someday this would be great. I think we have to tighten our belt. I've said this every single meeting, and do what needs to be done here. $5,000 in case something happens at the library building. Well, that's what we do when something goes wrong, but we keep setting aside 5,000 here and 10,000 here and 50,000 over there. Our budget's going up $1 million, I think, is the number that's been tossed around. That's unconscionable during this time. It's just, it is. And this is a big capital improvements, 1,197,000, and lumped together like this is how those little projects slid in last year, because open space completely slid in. Okay, so what I'm saying is these should be split out, because nobody's going to vote down the fire department or the transfer station or probably the cemeteries, but some of these need discussion and need people's input Do we want to pave the parking lot at the library? We have loose road that's not paved. We have lots of roads that are not paved. I think most of the driveways in this town are not paved. The post office is not paved, but the library, which has very low volume, we live 2 doors from the library, but that has to be paved. I think it's a little bit wasteful in these times is what I'm saying.
I appreciate that. We hear you, but in order to honor the agenda, I just want to continue moving forward. Is there anything else? Steve, you want to, oh, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. If
Should we
anyone
go to
else?
Joe, since this is going on so
Yeah, I
long?
wanted, that's
Mhm.
exactly what we're going to do.
Okay.
Excellent. If there's no more discussion about this, then I want to, speaking of the budget, bring our, the commissioner of the county, Commissioner.
And just to be clear, I have a lot of questions on the budget.
Perfect. That's
So
great. Yeah.
we will
Any
continue.
changes, anything, that's great. Joe, go on up there to that podium. Tell us who you are. Tell us a little bit about why you're here. And tell us how you can help us. Oh, boy. Oh, we brought handouts. That's great.
Prepared.
Thanks, Joe.
More prepared than some days I am, but I did bring a business bag. On the back of it, I'm
There you go.
It's a neighbor, I live 4 miles down.
We need you in front of the mic.
Oh, Joe, yeah, Joe, go in front of the mic.
Just because it's.
We'll get you on
gets
screen and that way
recorded.
we can hear you. Yes, sir.
Hey, better shot that time.
Thank you.
There we go.
Anyway, I'm your neighbor 4 miles down the road. I've been down there for about 53 years now. So in case you haven't seen me anywhere around.
Feel free to introduce yourself for all our viewers at home, Joe. Who might not know you.
Resident of Winthrop, came in 1971, plan to continue. And reached a point of frustration over the last few years about things going on in government, including budgeting and understanding. But there's so much there. And Carol, what you were describing, I've just gone through straight since the day I was sworn in on January 2nd has been budget, 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 budget. And county government's an interesting character. It's got basically 6 departments. The largest are basically 2 departments, which are the sheriff's patrol division, as well as the county jails, all fall into his particular department. And then we have a district attorney, about 19 assistant district attorneys there. We have a probate judge, as well as a registry of probate. We have a registry of deeds, and we have emergency management preparedness as well. In some respects, we also have a county treasurer, and I don't put him down for any reason because he's actually, they're doing a great job, but he doesn't have much of a staff. There's him and then the finance manager or something like that. But in any case, I did not know if you had seen this particular letter, which was being distributed through the different communities. And this letter was drafted by our county administrator, Scott Ferguson, to try to explain the budget. So I'm not going to try to explain what his letter is here. I do want to take and call some reference to a couple of things here. On the second page, you have a tax distribution schedule. I'm not here to toot my horn any more than I want to, but I will tell you this. I'm very conservative when it comes to spending other people's money, especially tax money. And I spent enough time going throughout this county and other neighboring areas to find many people that any increase is too much of an increase. And you don't have to go very far, whether it's a food pantry or to look at who's going and getting free clothes. These people are not necessarily people that want to be there many times, but that's the way they have to live because of the cost of everything. And that's a reality. And one thing I can tell you about in your budget, do not lose any employees if they're good. Good employees are worth their weight in more than gold because there isn't a substitute for good employees. And that's one of the problems we have with the budget that we have at the county level, is that we have a lot of good vacancies, but we can't find people to take and fill those jobs. We're actually engaged in what I call a form of underhandedness, in the fact that we go out and look for people who are already in other jobs and try to convince them to become a sheriff's deputy.
You and every other town with a police department.
And the latest proposal that I had to act on was whether or not it was worth $44,000 to pay to this entity to get this employee, because there is an agreement, particularly among the law enforcement people, that if that person goes to your community, you have to take and pay for it. And it's kind of like a finder's fee. You can call it anything you want to, but they range sometimes into the mid-20s, but now we're talking into the mid-40s. That's a lot of money, but that's how bad the hiring process is. And one of the major factors in our budget is overtime. We have well over $1 million in last year's actuals for overtime that was not budgeted, because we already budget at least $500,000. But we're $1 million by projection over that for just this year. I kept telling some of my fellow commissioners, that's not the way I would run things. But the reality is that we just do not have enough guards. Many times we do not have enough patrol deputies.
And so the overtime is the employees you do have are working to cover the hours that the employees you don't have would have worked.
Correct. And particularly in the jail situation, it's required that you have so many people for so many inmates. And we're in a situation where we average about, let's say, 150 inmates a night. This is not the fault of the county, but many of these inmates should have gone to trial before this. Some are sitting there more than 2 years waiting to have their day in court. And so while they are with us in the county jail, we must provide them the same services they would have got at the prison level. In fact, one of the major expenditures that we have, last year, a bill was passed called 1564. Became part of my campaign because I told everybody there's a hidden factor in here. I know a little bit about the legislature since I spent 40 years there as a lobbyist or administrator, et cetera. I know how to read legislation, and I also am very suspective of legislation that gets passed at the last minute, and this was one of those cases. Now, it was somewhat of a dilemma because the person who authored it was the person I was running against. But I had to challenge her and do it in a good way because I didn't dislike her personally, but just I felt that somebody had pulled the rug, so to speak, underneath her and not told her what they were doing. What they did was two things. One, they required a massive new medical program that included mental health services that would result in at least a $700,000 increase in our budget. But that was in the bill, and very few of us even suspected and knew what we were talking about in this whole thing. We're still fighting it because what does the state say to us? We'll give you $90,000 towards it. 90,000? Who pays the rest of that? It's all the taxpayers are paying the rest of it. Anyway, that's one part of it. But it starts with keeping people in jail too long. They don't get through the court system. Plus the pandemic had something to do with it and everything else. But we end up having to pay for it by law. The other thing is there used to be such a thing as a 4% cap, in that the county would only pay basically, or would only raise its taxes by 4% to cover any jail costs. Well, when's the last time they raised it by 4%? They finally admitted that this was not working. Now we have what is called a soft cap, which means they can do anything they want to. These are dilemmas that I didn't expect. I didn't know most of all this when I started this job, but I know I've been frustrated by it. Anyway, you'll see the tax distribution schedule. There's two things on there. We have to take and use state evaluation numbers. You don't. So we give you the state evaluation number, which averages 5% throughout the entire county. You apply it to what you use for evaluation numbers. And I don't know, Eric, if it's on there, if you get 9 or 10% increase in the county tax, which thankfully is still for many people, there are some people that still double digits, that's all it is. But it keeps growing all the time. That's what the scary part is, it keeps growing. And
You're
I'm
talking
very
about-
much aware of that.
You're talking about the valuation keeps growing?
Well, the valuation went up almost 15% last year. The state evaluation is done every year, even though it's a year behind.
Right.
You do yours. How many times have you done it in the last 10 years?
3 in the last 3 years, and we're headed for another one.
Fantastic.
Another rate increase, not rate increase, another revaluation factor, so that we're gonna go up 15%, just like you folks had to, unfortunately.
Well, and the other side of it too, and I talked about this, and people didn't understand what I was talking about, and I don't blame them. I would say the county automatically gets a tax revenue increase every year because of state evaluation. They look at me like, what? I said, we're by statute required to take and use the new evaluation. So if you're applying 5% to the amount of money that you raised 2 years ago and 5% to the amount of money you're raising this year, you automatically, just by applying 5%, get more money. Even though that's not enough to cover everything. You don't have that luxury, unfortunately, here. I don't even think the county should have that luxury of that type of thing. But anyway, I'm trying to just give you some things that are on here that make for interesting. You also see how the departments are set up. A couple of things you would notice, particularly on page 12, is that most of our increases are in the sheriff and in the jails. Now, having said all of that, we have a fantastic, I might bite my tongue on this thing because he's not necessarily my party, but the point is that you've got a fantastic sheriff here. He lives right here in Readfield, Ken Mason. He is one of the most concerned people I have ever met. And I started talking with him and dealing with him 6 years ago. When I first became involved in going to the county government meetings, going to the budget meetings, and speaking up and saying, this doesn't make sense to me. And of course, I was using some of my experience of 20 years being on the school board down in Winthrop, where I learned a lot of interesting things about budgets and financing and everything. But I point out that because we're lucky to have that. I find him a sheriff that is really concerned about things. He's maybe not the easiest person to work with, but you know, we talk the same language. We know where we're headed. And many of the things he's trying to do is to keep the costs down. But it's difficult when you have the state police, even though they won't admit it publicly, has withdrawn already rural patrols. And unless you have a contract with somebody locally to take and handle your police services, you're at the mercy right now, for the most part, of whether or not the sheriff has a patrol out here that he can send to you. We need more deputies on patrol. We only increased our budget by 1, and I just couldn't see getting any more because the state is the one that put us in this situation. We really need 4. And that's really at the minimum to take and cover what's going on in Kennebec County. And when I campaigned, I found just person after person telling me about how, let's call it nervous, they were about the situation in their communities. Didn't know who people were, why people were speeding, what the noise was, weren't seeing the state police people like they used to see them. Those things don't need to exist. And safety is one of my main elements. And last week, I'm proud to say that about this, well, actually it was now a week and a half. We had a budget committee meeting, the final one, and we started talking about, unfortunately, if you know anything about the court system in Kennebec County, we have a wonderful judicial center. And if you go into that new center, there are marshals there and they've got wands, and I have so many wires in me, and I've got a new, fake knee. I set it all off and everything. But the good news is that I'm going through a system. However, there's another part of the courthouse too. It's the older part, which is on State Street, that you can see that houses the probate people, the district attorney people. And literally until 10 days ago, it was wide open. And I mean it sincerely, I'm not bragging or anything. It's been going on for years. It was one of the first things that people came up to me who were employees who said, you got to help us do something about this. We had no guard at the main entrance. We had no guard at each of the individual departments. So on that Wednesday night, the budget committee started talking about it. And they finally, as you usually do, say, well, commissioners, what do you think about this? And my two commissioners in front of me all talked about it being a serious problem and everything. And I said, without giving my county administrator a heart attack, I can't believe that we're going to leave this room tonight and not vote to close that building and let nobody in until we have appropriate security and appropriate renovations. The next day, a sheriff's deputy was there. That was a Thursday. On Friday, our new security people, a firm which is based here in Readfield, was on the presence, armed. Can you imagine being in a place where people could just walk in? We have cases of secretaries grabbing people, tackling people, of other individuals tackling up people. The frightening part is, some of you have ever gone through probate, you'd understand this. You know, some of these probate cases are not friendly cases. But the fact is that who maintains things? And then the worst thing of all is that this is where our Supreme Court justices meet. When they have a session in Augusta, they meet in the old courthouse up on the 3rd floor in a very ornate courtroom, and there is no security. None. That's not the way I think we can run things. And so you may hear me explode about some things and say, oh, I always tell people, look, I'm so old now, it doesn't really matter, okay? The fact is, if I can get something to change for the better, that's what it's all about.
Thanks.
And I know it costs money. So anyway, we're doing some things. We're trying to get money, out of the state. The state seems to be neglectful of it. I think they have plenty of money that they could take and help finance it. We're not the only county that has similar problems here. But I'm always interested in what's on your mind too. Dispatch, I know, has been on your mind. I think we've solved it at least temporarily. I don't know where it's going to go. We as commissioners have decided that we do not really want to be in the dispatching business. I guess they used to be, and it was just full of errors. Obviously, you need more people to run something like that too, and money. But the main thing we can do is that Art True, who is our emergency director, is more than willing to serve as a facilitator to solve some problems. And it could be I've been in some towns where it's about, we can't afford that snowplow, but we need that snowplow in order to get things done. Can we share it with somebody? We got to think about sharing. Dams. We got some problems with some dams out there. And we've heard about some of these things that have come to us. Unfortunately, we don't have the money for it, but I'm a little bit nervous if some of these dams start to crumble, which some of them are doing right now, and if they overflood and stuff. So we've got to find a way of looking to the future, and you're identifying capital improvements. I'm looking at strategic plans, but basically I'm saying, you have to help us identify what we need to do. And, whatever you send to me today or send to me later, please do that. On the back of the cards, you do have my own phone number. On the front of the card, you have the county commissioner's number, but I want you to know where to find me and that type of thing. So I'm going to stop there and say thank you for having me tonight, but please contact me about anything.
Great. Steve?
Hey, Joe, I'd love to ask you just one quick question, just to help me in terms of thinking about budget in general, because I know that you are a conservative guy.
Yeah.
And I noticed that like the 24 budget, the proposed 24 budget is still up 10.8% over 23, right?
Mhm.
And that's coming from a conservative guy.
Well,
I'm not giving you a hard time. I'm just
no.
saying
Our
clearly.
budget was 30% in the beginning. Okay. And eventually they get down and I told them, I said, above 3, my heart starts to race, okay, and I sweat and
Well, you must have really been
I'm
sweating.
not going to be very agreeable. And there are areas right now I'm still trying to cut. Because for one thing, 2 years ago, when I went in and said to them, I'd like to know how much you are carrying over from the existing budgets that you're going to apply to the budget, they could not answer that question.
I noticed you used quite a bit from reserve this year, right?
Well, we did. And actually, most of it was all found money in the last 14 months.
because they hired a new finance director. We've got a new county administrator who understand the finances and that type of thing. But they found, as we found in the Winthrop school system, a lot of dormant accounts, that had never been finished. I mean, we got close to $1 million out of that we were all embarrassed about, but the fact is, that was money that we just didn't know about.
Well, that's cool. I'm very happy to know that you can find money. I'll be calling you. So you got some skills there that I want to.
Well, but that's one way. I mean, the other thing too is that we've got 3 software programs going on that they were just archaic. It was like they were using DOS, and I could still remember how to do that. So, I felt good, but they just weren't keeping up on the times, which all of us have. Which I wonder if the towns can't share more of that type of knowledge and cooperation too, to get some of the backroom stuff done. But we're in serious problems.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for.
Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for stopping by. We're going to pick up the agenda right about commercial haulers. We want to take a look at old business item 23083.
As I said, I have a lot of warrant questions. This is the first time that we're.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you for using Zoom, and I really mean that sincerely.
Yeah.
I cannot get a favorable vote to use Zoom for county meetings. I'm keeping it on the agenda every month.
Nice. Good.
If you ever talk to him, that would be good. You see him. I don't know why, because we use Zoom all the time. If I'm in Florida, I can be on Zoom and participate. We have very good equipment, just like your equipment.
Yeah.
I love your
It's
equipment.
where I think having the Zoom, it's a conversation we've had before, but we believe that it is vital to operations now. So thank you very much, Joe.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I'll be in touch.
Carol was talking about other questions about the budget and warrant, but I want to make sure that this right now we're just sort of reviewing, talking about what it is. Are there any questions moving forward about, or are these questions that can be brought up in a budget committee meeting?
No, because the other night I actually attended a budget committee meeting, and so last year we went article by article.
Yes.
And we talked about them
Mhm.
and what we might have agreed with and what we disagreed with. Are we not doing that tonight?
We will. We're just not in that, but we're not to that part of the process yet.
Okay.
So tonight, that literally is why I'm just hesitant, because it's just, this is a check-in moment. We are not approving. We will, before we send it out and make it final, there will be a moment where we go warrant item by item. We will group them together and say number 1 through 4 is, for example, administrative, or it's the elections, right?
Well,
Items on the warrant.
When does that happen? Because
Well,
thought
let's
tonight was the
consult the
night.
budget document that gives us the timeline. I'll
when
go
you guys had
online.
15 minutes for
the budget
warrant
committee.
review tonight, I'm like, that is
Yeah,
not doing it.
And
justice.
that's why I got your text message. That's why I just want to reiterate.
you,
It
Joe.
was just a review.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey, Bill. Let's go to budget information. I can actually, it's good to get this out because that way people will know exactly what it is. So the schedule, just to review, and this will help us. Today is March 13th. On the 15th, the select board will meet with the school board. On 17th is the deadline for legal review of the proposed warrant. So that's this Friday. Legal review has to be done. On the 22nd is the public budget meeting and hearing, which is next Wednesday. Public comment and recommendations on the budget. So that's a big one coming up next Wednesday, the 22nd at 6:30 p.m.
So we need to go line by line before we have the public discussion.
On the 10th of April, the select board meeting is the final budget and warrant review, because what we want to do is, if the public comment or recommendations come out of that, we would listen to that and change whatever items they want, if that's the feeling. So then we come back on the 10th, and that's our final review. So that's the process. We don't want to make decisions yet without public input. We want to have the public input, and then we can do the final review. Catherine?
So this is the first time we've seen the warrant, correct?
This is the first time you've seen the warrant.
Right,
The numbers are reflective of the budget that you've seen several times in various iterations.
Okay, so the numbers all come from the trio documents. I get that.
Yep.
So is the reason this was here was just for us to read through it, or is it for us to be able to make comments on it tonight?
That's up to you folks. I don't want to be driving the process, but the schedule was established and has been followed for many, many years in this way, in that the board should have time to look at the articles, the language, decide, maybe have some discussion about direction. That's why we're having the discussion tonight about the potential for breaking out individual capital items. This is a good discussion to have. But I think that more specific individual, maybe line item or questions about more detailed budget items. Carol, I'm happy to talk to you about those anytime, really. I try to always be available. I think that this would be appropriate for maybe some of those questions, but it really is up to the board as a whole, how you want to approach this and what you want to talk about and what you don't.
I think it's worth looking at the articles that were presented, especially Steve is new this year and hasn't
Thank
seen
you,
them
Catherine.
before.
And he may not be here for all the meetings, which is why
Right,
tonight's.
but just, I
appropriate.
think what we're looking at is the groupings of things, not, are these the correct numbers? Because the numbers, as Dennis said, are still up for
Correct.
discussion. They're still being discussed with the budget committee and with the public. And we've been looking at them all along. But I think it's worth looking at those. And I agree that I don't want to go back to the days of having 60+ items on the warrant. People did not like that. People like having the document, but when you get, approaching 50, it gets taxing for people. Even if you're reading it at home and voting at home and, absentee, it's a huge process. So I think it's valuable for us to at least review the categories and see, are there places we really disagree? And then if we really disagree on something, maybe that's what we could tackle at our next meeting, is how to maybe rearrange those.
And I think you made a point that I wanted to hit on, Catherine, is that we do send out an explanation document. Every year we send out to every household in Readfield a document that has basically what the things that the select board would like to see explained are, and tries to give at least a primer on some of this stuff, and also gives links to all of the background information and a summary of the public involvement schedule, the voting schedule and all of that. So I think that there's some value in that too, that relates to our earlier discussion about what the town does to help educate people who might not be familiar. We do, for 5 or 7 years, we've done that mailer that's developed with usually the select board chair, myself, members of the budget committee, and the select board, as an interest it rises. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say about the mailing.
So do you want to just go through these warrant articles? Would that
Through
satisfy?
every article line by line in a public meeting, not a private meeting, not a budget meeting, not a tiny meeting, while Steve's here. And before we go to the public and before this goes out, I need to understand it. And I have 2.5 pages of questions. So can I make a motion that anything to do with the beach be postponed for another meeting? We've got things right now that are 2 agenda items involving the beach, which I don't think is necessary tonight.
Well,
Can
it's going to
we
be
do
on the
that?
warrant also, so it has to. and
What's
it's-
that?
We're
it's
talking
gonna
about the
be on
warrant. We got to have the beach on there because it's going to be on the warrant, right?
I'm just talking about the content of, we don't need to talk about the beach tonight,
We
but we
do,
need to
because it
talk
has,
about the articles.
it has to go
Well-
to legal review by
Yeah.
a certain date. So we do have to go over that
Yeah,
Which is by,
because it's an
because
ordinance.
we want, which is Friday. So if we have to talk about the beach tonight in order for it to be on the warrant, which is what we want to have.
Why don't we just read down through the articles
I
and,
think that's fantastic.
and just see
Thank
how
you.
they go?
So
Great.
just, we'll have to extend it. I make a motion to extend the meeting by 45 minutes. We have 40 minutes of agenda items on top of this still to go.
Okay, great.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to extend the meeting by 40 minutes. All in favor? Great, thank you so much. Excellent. So we'll start on the warrant just to review and talk about them. Article 2, we'll go through each one. Article 2 is for select board members to be elected. Those blanks will be filled in when there are actually people that will be running. Same thing with elect RSU 38, a local school committee as well, school committee member for 2-year terms, and finally the school committee there. Article 3, shall the town of Readfield vote to allow the select board to establish? That just gives us the power. That's administrative, right? And then number 4 is the same thing. It's a part of the administrative. Shall the town vote to fix September 29th as when the commitment of taxes? That's basically setting up when people have to pay. Article 5 is the rate of interest, which is again another administrative item. And then
that's a big change, I'll note, from past years, right?
It is, and it's set by the Secretary of State.
Right.
So we don't
Number
really have
5
any.
is, that's what I,
The 8%.
okay.
Yeah.
Some of those, like, and number 4 on unpaid taxes, is that an increase, the 8% on number 4?
That is,
Yes.
yeah. So those two typically mirror one another because we don't want to have a variance. There's some circumstances where the board could adjust that, but generally speaking, the Secretary of State sets those numbers, and then the towns mirror those.
The 5 or number 4?
Both.
So
Yes,
the
4 and
Secretary
5 are
of
kind of related.
So what was the percent on interest on unpaid before? Because like right
think it
now,
was
if someone's
4%.
got unpaid taxes, they're
Yeah.
already hurting, right? And we're gonna increase the penalty they pay on top of the unpaid taxes?
Well, because costs have gone up, interest
Okay,
rates have all gone up. What we
okay,
pay
but
and what
it's
we earn.
interest, it's not,
But the town pays interest on everything that any money we borrow and owe. And so if the interest rate we pay is going up and we don't up our interest rates to account for the fact, I mean, interest rates are going up everywhere, right? I think it'd be unrealistic to not mirror that. And if the state makes that go up to 8%, then I think, we have historically done that, mirrored the state, and that makes sense to do that.
Yeah. Cool. Article 6, town will vote to authorize municipal officers, if an article fails, to spend an amount not to exceed 3/12 of the budget item the town is legally obligated to pay. Eric, can you give a little bit of a
Really quick. So
layman?
that's the article that's there if something doesn't pass. So for example, if folks were upset with capital and said, nope, we're not having it, this would give us the ability to carry forward or continue on with operations. And I guess I shouldn't say capital because that's
a bad one.
That's the bad one. Catherine called that out immediately.
Yeah,
As soon as I said,
She
no.
knew it.
But for instance, salaries. If we
Salaries,
didn't
yeah.
approve the salaries
Yeah.
line, that doesn't mean we're not going to pay people who are working.
That's right. And then we can pay them until we can have an on-floor town meeting or set another special secret ballot vote. But typically, what would happen if an article doesn't pass is that we would then have an on-floor town meeting to find out what the reason was. And we've had to do that before. Joe mentioned the dams. Cook Lake Dam, at least once, didn't pass. And then people were informed about why it was so very important and what it meant for our property values to have lake levels that were steady, and then it passed. And then we actually have both of our dams in town, and that one in Winthrop recently replaced. So that problem he was talking about isn't Readfield. I'm just happy to say that.
Gotcha. I'm with you.
So-
I'm with you.
So the 3/12,
Is a quarter.
I thank you very
So
much.
it- let's just operate-
I know it's a quarter, but why do we just say a quarter? Why 3/12? Is that 3 of the 12 months in a
Yes.
year?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
So that we
Oh,
can.
we go. You got it, you got
We
it,
have
you got it.
3 months to figure it out.
right,
Right.
that's what it makes. sense.
Okay.
I got you.
Exactly. And that's where we
3/12,
have that.
I
One quarter.
meant a quarter as in a
3/12.
time period,
I
not
know,
as
just
in a
yanking your check.
fraction.
Right, right.
All right, so
Very good. Oh, I love it. We move on. Article 7, shall the town vote to raise the appropriate $689,980 for the administration budget category for the following budget lines: municipal administration, insurance, office equipment, assessing, the code enforcement officer,
Plumbing,
and what's B1?
building inspector.
Building inspector, BI, grants, planning services, heating assistance, and attorney fees. Any questions about Article 7?
I have 2.
Go for it.
First of all, the assessing, okay, question, is that paying for the assessor?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, because before it said we've already set aside everything for the revaluation. That's actually mentioned later,
That is.
which I'm like, I thought something in here says it's already been paid for. There's no tax impact, but we can talk about that later. The other question I had was the grant planning services. And in like the very last page of this, you had the proposed changes.
Yes.
And there was a
so-
proposed change to 8,000 for a grant. Is that a real thing?
So what those are in yellow for a reason. And part of the reason is that they happened so recently after that budget committee meeting that you went to. And that recommendation was made, not by vote, but by consensus, I would say, that was added. But those changes that are in yellow are not reflected yet in this draft of the warrant, because we have to get things out for the select board, and those aren't in these numbers yet. But I think it was very important to make a note that they were being considered in the budget.
Okay, so I was at that meeting. One person said this might be nice. There was no consensus. There was hard. Somebody said something, and then I see, boom, 8,000 grant ready.
I guess I saw it differently, but
Yeah.
I guess so.
But that
Yeah.
will come up at the
It'll be
next
on
budget committee
Yeah.
meeting,
So my
right?
question
Sure,
is,
yeah.
we have a lot of very intelligent people in this zip code of all kinds. 8,000 is a lot, I think. I think we have probably people locally that if you say we need a grant writer for thus and such, and you're so inclined or moved to do that, $10,000 for grants, I think that's completely unacceptable. You have 2,000 in here, okay,
But you're saying that number will change to 8,000, right?
or-
It's
or
not
yeah,
gonna
that
be
increase, yeah, because
8,000
the-
more increase.
8,000 more, so
10,000,
$10,000.
in one year.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we have a lot of people saying that we should just find grants. And we do not have the staff for it. And I
Right.
haven't seen people come forward to jump up and say, I want to write your grant for you. I had plenty of people say, you should go find grants. And I think this is one of those areas where you have to put a little bit of money in to help us get the rest out. And if we
Amen.
don't spend it on grants, if we don't spend it on applying for grants, then that money would go into the general fund and be able to offset taxes next year.
know.
But it's, the idea was, and again, I agreed with that recommendation from the individual on the budget committee and maybe a couple others, depending on how you want to interpret it. That was a good idea, to be smart about putting money up front so that we could lower the tax impact overall by applying for grants that could bring in a lot of money. But that's why that was done.
8,000, he just said maybe we should get a professional, and that 8,000 is plucked out of somewhere, and I think it's excessive, is what I'm saying.
Sure, no,
Well,
I
we
can
all
understand
have-
that.
yeah, we all have. our,
So-
Yeah.
Let's
Uh,
move on to
moving on.
Article 8.
Article 8, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $176,710 for municipal maintenance budget category? All set there?
The only question I had, how many vehicles do we have? We're talking about all of transfer station and,
So
No.
as far as trucks, we have two
well, the vehicle
trucks.
maintenance, that's everything.
Everything, that's everything. Yeah. Yep, just the maintenance, not the actual vehicles. Sorry.
Article
But
9.
We just have 2 trucks.
Two trucks, one EV, which is really no maintenance because it's on a lease right now and it doesn't. And then the other would be the equipment like the Bobcat and things like that. That are, the Bobcat, I think, is actually mostly in the maintenance line. There might be some coming out of the transfer station, but yeah.
Article 9, shall the town vote to raise $77,847 for community service budget category, animal control, Kennebec Valley Council of Governments, age-friendly initiatives, library services, Readfield TV, streetlights, and the Maranacook Dam. Thumbs up?
Yep, and there is offsetting revenue for some of these, such as Readfield TV. We get a revenue in from Charter, correct, Eric? It's our
Yes.
franchise fee,
And that helps cover other costs as well.
right?
And we move to Article 10. Shall the town vote and raise appropriate $49,548 for recreation, parks, and activities budget category for the following lines: the beach, recreation, heritage days, conservation, town properties, and trails.
And is that just like beach employees? That's not like any
That's beach
particular
em-
expense?
This is the operating budget. So this
Okay.
would be anything that the beach spends money on.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
It includes the employees.
includes the employees,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Article 11, shall the town vote to pursue the development of an expanded multi-use recreational area at the fairgrounds property consistent with the town's fairground management plan, with any final project plans coming before the voters for approval, and with the project construction to be funded exclusively by federal, state, and private grant sources and donations, which the town is hereby authorized to apply for, accept, and expend. This is the fairgrounds one. Now, there was talk about this going on the November
Yes.
ballot. So do you want to talk about that,
I
Aaron?
will quickly, and then I'll let
Thank you.
Steve talk about it. This was a first draft that tried to meld the direction that I had heard from the select board about talking about this. The current status of that working group that's looking about the fairgrounds development or continued development. And at this point, I could take it or leave it. I think it's important for people to know that something's going on. I think it's important as maybe a straw poll vote on you doing this through grant funding. But I also think that there is a risk in being too general at this point without having a full plan. And I think November would be a good time to do that. I think that this may lead into a November vote, a separate vote, maybe on a final plan. And I think that would be a good direction, because if we get a no vote on this, then we can say, maybe not. But if we get a yes vote, then we could move forward and talk about it in November.
And more specific.
Yeah, and there have been some suggestions about changing the language on this, but I will let Steve talk because he is the guy.
He's the
One of the guys.
he's part
He
of
and
the
Jerry
working
are like
group.
You're the guy,
They're like the
huh?
dynamic duo.
Steve, you want to talk a little bit about this?
I would say so, yeah. Jerry and I were asked to be the process leaders for the group of, representatives from all the committees in town that wanted to give us help with that. And I would say that my concern is that the folks on the committee, I think, we're operating with the idea, we're trying really hard to get consensus and try to put something forward that we could vote on in this year in June,
yeah.
right? I do understand where it's coming from, the idea that, well, it's still what we came to consensus on is, yes, we feel it's appropriate to construct a softball field without using taxpayer money, applying for grants at the fairgrounds. We were going to be meeting on March 28th with the landscape architect to look at what that plan will look like. We have a lot of input from the various committees about what areas will be conserved, where the field will go and all that jazz. But we wanted to meet with the landscape architect and have maps in front of us and come to consensus on that. I'm a little concerned because I feel like most of the folks in the committee seem like, yeah, let's get this decided so we can move forward, right? I'm reluctant to speak for all of them because I'm not all of them. I'm just me. But I do feel that was a general feeling of the folks who are on the committee. That said, I do know I've spoken to a couple of the folks in the committee since this came out. And, that one of them said, well, what's most important is that we do it right. Okay. And if it takes another, June to November, what's that? That's 6 to 11, 5 months. Thank you. 5 12ths, bud. 5 12ths, not 3 12ths. Okay. Then, maybe that is what it has to be. It'll be interesting to see. I haven't had a chance to talk to the whole committee, so I don't know how they all feel. I can see pros and cons that we also have a lot of things, we're talking about a lot of budget stuff, even though this is not a budget impact item, it's still, a big deal. And it's, there's a lot of other things that folks have to consider in June. Sean, I'm curious from you as someone else who has sat on the committee, what's your take? I'd love your take on that also.
Yeah. So what I've really enjoyed of this meeting is the way that Jerry and Steve have worked to garner consensus and hear voices. I think Steve is being mild by saying, I think people were for. I think there was a lot of, let's just move something.
Yeah.
And can we stop talking about this and move something?
And do something.
I think every committee said, yep, we know this needs to happen. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. We know this needs to happen. the fairgrounds is the right place. Let's move. Now, there are other avenues of what people may like to see in addition to softball that has not been hashed out, I would say. But in terms of softball, there is a clear and convincing consensus from rec, trails, conservation, age-friendly, cemetery. Is that it?
Any at all?
Historical Society, maybe, I don't.
No, Historical Society decided not, didn't send a representative. I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I think we got them.
yeah.
I think we
so.
got them all.
Yeah.
Well,
And,
I
and
think-
that is something we did not have before.
For sure,
Right.
And,
absolutely.
and I think that there's been fantastic conversations. I think every committee brought knowledge, experience, and I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed just the way it's been facilitated. I think if we don't move something in June, it would be a sad waste of the hard work for the last month. Or 6 weeks, but it was a quick timetable that people have been working on.
People really
Yeah.
did commit to like
Yeah.
meet often and
Yeah.
try to make.
We've met
things
often.
happen.
So you think there should be an article, maybe not just this one exactly the way it's worded? Does that sound right?
Well, I like this because it says to pursue the development of an expanded area.
Yeah.
So you're not walking into anything, which is what I'm hearing you say, is you guys haven't really come up with just what it should be that we present, but we know it should be something.
You know, what's great about the different minds, right, is age friendly is talking about accessibility, accommodations and things. You have conservation really coming at it from their angle, and recreation wanting the opportunity to utilize multi-use. And I think we all understand each other. And I think, yeah, we know that there will be other conversations and changes. But I do believe that I really felt hearing consensus was pretty cool.
Right.
that
Yeah, well,
night.
it was very cool.
Yeah. I mean, if I've been having this talk for a while, so
For a while.
so to hear just the support, and even when Greg's not on right now, but I would say this to Greg's face too. But even when they read Greg's statement of his consensus to it, I thought, and even they were just like, and by the way, Greg's on board. You know, it was really funny the way they worded it.
I
So-
saw your tear.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
I saw that.
Holding it back. So
Yeah.
no, I really appreciate this. I really appreciate the conversation.
So are you guys saying that this should have more in it?
Well, no,
No.
I think,
Oh,
I think that the key thing that I think we have to be cognizant of, and Jerry and I have talked about this, Jerry is truly the brains of the outfit here.
Yeah.
And you don't have to agree to that so quickly, but it's true. Okay.
In other words, you're not.
I caught that. Okay, that's all right. Okay. But he is saying that the language as that article is written is not going to be sufficient to move forward with applying for the LWCF grant. You know, it would need more specificity.
It would, and that's why,
So that's,
the
I just want people to be
LCWF
aware of that.
That's absolutely right, and that's a good point, because no matter what we put in this article, we cannot move forward with LCWF because one of their provisions is that we have our funding in place to do the project, or we commit to funding the project, and then they reimburse us for their share. So we would need to have much more robust financial considerations than what this offers.
Yeah.
So that article that you're talking about with the financial piece for LCWF would have to come in November anyway, more
Got
than
it.
likely.
Okay.
So this really truly is a straw poll question. Do the voters of Readfield want us to pursue this, which we could come back in November with a more detailed plan?
Yeah,
And
and maybe
offer them there.
some grant funds in hand from
Yeah.
other agencies. Maybe
Yeah.
we pursue, and maybe we have some donations in hand.
Well, I mean, I think we could have a more detailed plan also, though,
Yeah.
by the June.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember, we have to
Yeah.
have it in time for the absentee ballots,
I understand that.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, we've
a
looked.
related question. So is this where the 8,000 increase in grant writing funds was put in or put in for?
It was put in for, this was what brought it up, but I think it applies to other, again, it's a general pot of money for grant writing.
Right.
And we've been caught a few times when we don't have funds and we have to go to the select board contingency for grant writing and for planning projects.
Right.
Like planning, doing planning work at the Readfield Beach, for example, we would have to could use a fund like this, but yeah, it's generally correct. Yeah.
Excellent.
And so that would be a good reason to have that 8,000 there, so that if we need it, I know we've had this problem in the past in town. We've had grant writers and they're like, well, yes, I'd be happy to write a grant for you, but this is my living. And so I get paid for what I do for my living, just like you get paid for going to work and teaching. You don't stay and teach other people for free, you know, and so.
Almost, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Almost.
That's another state issue.
I think I'd rather put 2,000 in. I just hate that here's a pot of money in case we need that. I'd rather you come to us and say, we need a grant writer for this. How's that?
But see, then the problem with that for me is that lets the select board choose out of that 25,000 what we're going to spend, and the voters don't get to choose that. Whereas by putting it in a warrant article, the voter gets to say, okay, look, we think it's a good idea to get this project at the fairgrounds and we don't want to pay for it. So, okay, we'll spend $8,000 to try and get that money.
But when you
So if they vote it down, then we're like, okay, so they don't really want to do this.
Yeah.
Whereas otherwise, it's just the five of us get to make that choice. Oh, well, we'll spend $8,000 on it. So I think it does more to put it in the budget so that the voters can say yes or no, rather than the five of us saying that.
But when you put $1 million in a capital budget, they're not saying I'm voting for a grant writer. They're not voting for that. They're voting for a truck and the transfer station and the cemeteries. They're not saying, oh, I like that one.
No, they would be
That's my
voting on
thing.
it when they vote on
But
Article
it's not in
10.
capital.
That's not in
what I'm
capital.
saying.
It's not
It's just
capital.
Article 10.
So is everyone all set with the Article 11 anyway,
Yep.
and moving forward? Okay, Article 12, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate 187,505, $187,505 for protection, which includes the fire department operating, ambulance service, tower sites, dispatching, and emergency operations.
Eric,
Questions?
is this the new dispatching that we're going to talk about later?
The dispatching, I believe, is included in this number.
Okay, because
Okay.
that is an increase from last year, but we don't have a choice.
No choice.
Yeah.
Okay, Article 13, shall the town raise $19,500 for cemetery materials and services?
And that's cemetery budget,
Yep, so budget category.
like to
Yep.
run the cemeteries. There's just all of these redundant things, like cemeteries in there 3 times, and I'm like,
Well,
so
that's,
I can address my question later. This is for the budget for the cemeteries,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, the expense side. So
Yes.
expenses and revenues are categorized separately.
Yes.
Yep.
Article 14, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $586,750 for the roads and drainage budget category? Summer road maintenance, $118,000, winter road maintenance, $468,750.
and we're contractually obligated for that winter road maintenance, correct?
Because we've already signed the contract.
We are, and we're accounting for the CPI increase, which I think we put at 6 or 8%. I'd have to look back, but we did account for an increase there. Also increased usage of salt material because we just seem to be using more, and people seem to like the higher level of service. So again, back to that budget mantra of the services people want at the level of service they expect as cost effectively as possible.
Love that. Article 15 is, shall the select board of the town be authorized to enter into an agreement providing for a purchase of a pumper tanker fire truck, borrowing on behalf of the town a sum not to exceed $548,057 on such terms as it determines are necessary. This is the fire truck article.
The bond.
Yes,
The bond.
it's all in there.
So then I still are like, so why is that here voting for the bond and 600,000 on capital improvement? Why is it?
Because one is the permission to borrow the money, and the other is permission to spend the money on a fire truck. So they're two separate things.
So
by
if
law.
one passes and the other one doesn't,
We've
Then
got
we
a
have to
problem.
go back to town meeting and decide what to do.
But we got 3/12 of an operating budget.
Yeah,
hopefully,
that's
to
it.
Get us.
But it wouldn't be
quarter.
used on that. We would not
Could
buy
be-
3/12 of a fire truck
Yeah.
under that authority. But Carol, to your point, this piece is required separate by state statute, by state law. And I think it does, help that people get to see what the actual costs of borrowing are relative to the cost of the truck, because this is only a portion of the total cost of the truck, as you know. And so we do have a separate line where we say, this is what it costs in total. This other piece is just the borrowing that we're doing to help finance it.
So the 623, the 70,000 more in fire department capital improvements, does that include something else, or that's the real cost?
That's the full cost of the fire
Okay,
truck.
thank you.
Yep.
If I can point out under cost point 2, I found a weird little number thing. It says an estimated rate of 2.5%, but then it has parentheses 4%.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good typo. It should be 4%. We estimated it at 4%. I adjusted the number, but not the words. Thank you.
Good catch.
Greg Durgan's very proud of you.
Yes, a little bit. Are we good with the pumper truck? Shall we move on to 16?
Yep.
Shall the town vote to raise appropriate $1,197,282 for the capital improvements budget category for the following budget lines with all accounts to be carried forward? The fire department, which is inclusive of the pumper truck, Giles Hall, library building, open space, cemetery, sidewalk, roads, equipment leases, and transfer station. All of those, again, capital improvements to that.
Okay,
Carol?
so thank you.
Yeah.
Where to start? First of all, so we had above 19.5 for cemetery budget. And then we have capital improvement cemetery 17,000. And then later we're going to see designated funds for cemeteries is 12,000 and another 5,000. So it's like we have designated funds. Is that stuff they have in their budget but haven't spent yet?
So that's revenue.
Designated funds?
Is
No, there's
revenue.
revenue above that.
There's
Number
Estimated revenue.
36 is designated,
Yeah, and then
So
Article
it's-
35.
It's money they already have.
but
that they're-
hasn't been spent.
Right, that's going to be spent to cover these expenses here in Article 16.
So why do we want to take 17,000 out of the cemeteries to reduce the tax commitment, but then we're asking for 17,000 in capital improvements?
yes, they're offsetting.
Right.
But what is the capital improvements in cemeteries?
So they are buying a portion of a leaf vacuum.
Okay,
And so that's 12,000 for their half of that. The maintenance is paying for the other part because it's also a brush chipper. We talked about that chipper shredder at the capital planning meeting to make it more efficient and safe to do their jobs with the limited staff we have. And then the 5,000 is, I believe, going into their reserve so that, again, if they have a need, they have money available to repair stones that are damaged, or if a tree falls over and crushes a monument, we can repair that or replace it.
okay, and then Guile Hall 10,000 is for,
Just reserves.
I don't get this. So
It's
we
the
did-
savings account.
I
so that
know,
when-
but
So Carol, when we talked about, I don't think you were here for that, for the capital improvement plan. So what we do, there are two ways you can approach it. You can save no money, and then when expenses come up, you have to pay them. And so if we had a catastrophic failure, say, of the heating system, and it was $45,000, the next year we would have to increase the town budget by $45,000 and everyone's taxes would go up. So instead of doing that, our approach has been, we'll save $10,000 every year so that when things go wrong, because things wear out or they break, we'll have some money that we can use for that. So it's a level spending. So everybody spends the same amount each year in taxes. We try to keep it very level so that we don't have, well, this year it's less because we didn't have any big expenses. And next year, oh, we're going to have to raise it a lot because we have a bunch of expenses and we didn't save anything. And so that's really, I like your analysis, Sean, of, it's a savings account. And so it's kind of, that's the whole point of the capital plan, is to try and keep things level.
Yeah.
And by looking out far in advance, we can say, well, we know that, the estimated life of the windows, well, maybe now that's can be pushed out farther, so we don't have to save as much for that. But maybe the furnace, like we put in the heat pumps, and that was, kind of a COVID thing to keep the air fresher and recirculated more and let people be meeting.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that-
yeah, Kelly, I definitely, I've been asking Eric a number of questions also, and that was one of my questions. And that idea does make a lot of sense to me, because if you don't put money aside for those big expenses, I mean, that's like a homeowner saying, well, I'm not going to keep my money in my bank account because, nothing's going to break anyway.
Right.
And then your septic system bites the dust and you're screwed, and so I think it does make sense to put small amounts like that. And what I think that when in my chats with Erica about this, what makes sense to me is that there's real thought into how much goes into each of those lines, like looking at the
Right.
possible cost of these things that could need to be repaired or replaced at some point. It's not just like $10,000 is a good number. You're looking at the individual possible expenses. And so it makes sense to me in terms of, surprises in a budget for taxpayers doesn't seem like a very good idea.
Right.
So I do understand that.
And those are not huge. Sidewalk 67.5, is that Church Road?
That is, yeah.
Okay, so are we gonna talk to the residents? We still don't have a date.
We don't have a date. We don't have
plans.
plans from the engineer. I did talk to Doug Riley and the road committee about that, and Matt LaBerge last week. And they expect that anytime in the next couple of weeks, we should be getting that information. But we can't schedule anything until we have something from the engineer.
Okay.
But that is still planned. And then again, that number reflects the full cost for the year for that planning work, which will be paid 80% by the federal dollars. So it's an 80. So you'll see offsetting revenue coming in elsewhere in the warrant as part of the revenue articles.
So the town part of that cost will be somewhere on the order of
13,000.
Yeah.
$13,000.
So there's 30,000 in offsetting revenue for the sidewalk grants. And then there's 7,500 that's remaining in designated funds. So we'll be paying out about 30,000. We'll still be getting a chunk of that back from the federal government because they agreed to pay 80%.
Yes.
Did we have the Main Street sidewalk on a warrant? Was that in
We
a?
did.
Oh,
We
yeah.
did,
Should
yeah.
this be? Could it be split out?
I mean, that's up to the select
we
board. I mean, it's,
Well, we did approve, well, we haven't,
we approved
we've
the
had-
federal borrowing, or we
Right.
approved the project under a separate article 4 years ago, because we had to approve it to apply for the grant. So it was approved back then. This is just approving the spending to execute that, and in some cases address cost increases that have happened since we started this 5 years ago.
and this is all for the planning. This isn't for the building.
That's correct.
And so we'll have another warrant article when it's time to do the building, and when we have the cost.
Yes.
So there'll be another vote on doing the sidewalk.
Yeah. Rather than doing it all at once, we're doing it as it comes ahead. And that way, if people say during the engineering phase, we don't want this, then we're done. And that's how we've been approaching it.
And by people, we mean the majority of the people who vote on that particular item.
Yes. Yep.
Did you have a question, Steve?
No, I just was wondering then, if we thought, well, let's break that one out, right? I think we'd want to have an explanation at the very least that the town outlay of that is not $67,000,
Yeah,
right?
and that would be
Exactly
in
what I'm
You know,
thinking.
in the explanation document that we put together, that will be included. The trouble is, if this was on floor town meeting, this would all be very easy to
Right,
explain
that's
to
right,
people
that's
that
right.
are there.
But we
You
all
know-
get it in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
No,
all
no, no,
comes to
let's
every
be
household,
serious.
yeah. Yes, let's be serious.
No, seriously, that's not hard to understand. And we
Okay.
have 41 questions on this warrant. We had 60 something last time. So there's not a lot of difference between 41 and let's say 50. If people understand what these expenses are. And I don't think 67.5 again is a big expense. I don't think if they see that and see, oh, okay, most of it's going to be covered by an already approved grant, that it's going to go down. But I think, give us a benefit of the doubt that I think we need an explanation of what 1.2 $2 million is. And that one is like, okay, a sidewalk. Okay, where's this sidewalk going? Oh, and it's mostly paid for by a grant. So I don't want to keep hearing, oh, if we add more to the thing, people are going to get upset, or we send it to them. You're sending it to them lumped together in 1.2 million.
Document with the details of every.
It's not
Every
gonna,
article is explained.
it's not going
Yes, it
to,
does.
It goes to every.
I
Yeah,
want
you get
that
it.
one as a set aside, and I want open space as a set
But what Carol's
aside.
saying is she says the voters won't have the opportunity to just accept or reject just that
Oh, I
one
see what you're
thing.
saying.
Okay,
Right.
so for instance,
Sure.
2 years ago, we had land use ordinance revisions, and we had a resident in town who lobbied hard, long, and that's all I'll say, about not having people accept that because of one thing in there. So it was voted down by the people. Well, our problem was we didn't know which part of, I think there were 8 different pieces. So we guessed that it was the part that this one resident was being heavily lobbying about. And so what we did was we regrouped. This is part of that quarter time period to do with things. And we said, okay, we think this is probably what it was. We talked to some people and we took out the 7 things and we put those on for a special election, I think in November that year,
I
or
think
maybe
so,
it was
yeah.
the following
It might have
year.
been the following year, but yeah.
And it passed. So it appeared that we guessed correctly what it was. And so that's how we can handle this. So if people really don't want a sidewalk, or they really don't want a fire truck, or they really don't want whatever, they'll vote the whole thing down. We've seen it done before.
Why are we guessing? Why don't we take a couple of items that people have a lot of interest in and make it a question with a clear explanation? So I would like to say, I would like to see open space and sidewalks in a separate warrant with a full explanation of it. And that's going to add just a couple of questions. Is that not acceptable?
I think it's really arbitrary that you're deciding what people get to vote on. I think they should all go together. They should all be separate.
Then we can separate them all out.
Well, I think they should all be together personally. But
So one quick thing about explanations, because again, the secret ballot format does not allow us to put explanations in the warrant proper.
Itself. That we
It
fill
is,
in.
it's just not allowed. It's a severe
By law.
limitation of that form of voting. So we do send out that mailer, but we can't just put an explanation in saying, well, this is offset here and this is offset there on that actual ballot. It only can be presented. And that's one reason why we send that document out, because it has to be separate, which is ridiculous in my view, but we don't have control over that.
So we have a lot of questions that say, do you want to spend $900 for sexual abuse? Do you want to spend $1,000 for behavior, Kennebec behavioral? I would like a question. Do you want to spend $50,000 for open space? Do you want to spend $67,500 for sidewalks on Church Street? And by the way, there's a grant that will offset it.
you
I'm
can't
not
say
saying-
Can't
that.
say that though.
What do you mean?
He's
Law
saying,
says you can't say that.
Can't say what?
And there's a
Which part?
grant, and by the way, there's a grant that offsets
Okay.
it.
Okay.
you can send out that information
67.5
separately,
for-
but you
yes.
can't have it on the ballot
But they'll know before they come in.
if they read what you send out.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So I hear what you're saying, Carol, and I guess what I'll just say, and I don't want to argue about it or debate it, is that the reason that those sexual assault and all of those nonprofits are separated out individually is because the select board has a policy that says that anything that comes in from a nonprofit is broken out individually. So the board has a policy on it. So my suggestion would be, and that's where I started, was that the board ought to consider a policy for these other items. But I don't know if you're going to find resolution tonight, the board on this, and I certainly don't want to jump in and try to direct it. But I'll just say that the policy is the reason those are separate.
And the reason we ever made a policy on that is because those are actually donations. And so the controversy there is, should it be up to individual citizens of our town to decide who they want to donate money to? Or should the town be deciding who each of us should be donating money to? And so that's why there's a petition process, and we decided that they should be individual so that as a town, we could decide, yes, we're okay with donating here and here and here, but maybe not over here.
Mhm.
And if we lumped them all together, it would be unfair to each of the petitioners because they're completely separate organizations, whereas capital is just capital. So I guess we just philosophically
Sure,
don't
yeah,
agree right now. So I think we should leave that maybe
Okay.
till our next meeting.
Fantastic. Article 17 says, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $390,752 for the solid waste budget category with all accounts to be carried forward? Good, thumbs up. Excellent. Article 18, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $47,665 for regional assessments budget category for the following lines, which the town is legally bound to pay anyway: Cobussy Watershed and First Park.
And
Good.
boy, didn't we find out that towns can't withdraw from First Park?
Yeah.
Was that Rome that was trying to do that and they got shut down?
Yeah. Well, it was just a foolish time to do it. If
I
had
know,
tried
they
to do it-
finally never
They
making money.
finally started making
I know.
money this year.
What?
First Park will make money, so we've
But that-
already put the
Yeah.
money in.
And that will
so-
never be a discussion again
Thank
by any
goodness.
town.
Yeah. Article 19, shall the town vote and raise or appropriate $375,265 for the Kennebec County tax budget category, which the town is legally bound to pay.
So this one's, I gotta talk to Joe, because
Yeah.
we had heard 6.6%, now it's 10 point something, I think. That's gonna be a change.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's on the county. We have no
Okay,
control
so
over
what
that.
is that amount now? in
It,
here?
it says on the warrant right now, we have 375,265.
Because in here it says it's 355, 185.
Okay.
It says the 24 proposed budget, town of Readfield.
Okay, well, then that would be a decrease then. That's something's, I'll talk with Joe and
Well,
find
it-
out.
Joe.
It is on
Call Joe.
here. It's mysterious.
It is 5% change in taxpayer contribution to budget. The total budget change was actually down 10%. But I think that's because of the valuation
Yeah.
difference.
Yes.
Okay.
So
the
it is
tax
5%.
impact Is 5%. Okay,
Right,
so
and that amount was 355, where was it?
So
Readfield.
that would make sense then, because we had budgeted 6.6 based on the prior discussion. They've actually dropped it by a point, but
Yeah,
okay.
355, 185.
So we
Yep.
will update that to reflect their current actual estimate.
Great. Article 20, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate 159,108 for the debt service budget category, which we are legally bound to pay. This is paying our bills from the fire truck bond, the Maranacook Lake Dam bond, the 2020 municipal building bond, and the 21 building and paving bond.
And those are capital and interest, correct, Eric?
That's it.
Look, principal and interest, yes.
Sorry,
Yep, yeah.
principal.
No, it's getting late, so yeah,
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Article 21, shall the town vote to raise $10,000 for local tax relief budget category? Okay.
That's money we already have.
Yep. Shall the town vote and raise appropriate requested amount of $1,000 for, we'll go through these. Article 22 is $1,000 for Kennebec Behavioral Health. And as Eric just explained, this is why these are busted out. Article 23 is $1,500 for Central Maine Agency on Aging, the Cohen Center and Senior Spectrum. Article 24, shall the town raise for money, $1,312 for Family Violence Agency. Shall the town vote and raise appropriate amount of $787 for the Courtesy Boat Inspection Program for Torrey Pond. Article 26 is $910 for Sexual Assault Agency. Number 27 is $2,500 for the 30 Mile River Association. Article 28 is $5,000 for the Readfield Union Meeting House. Article 29 is $1,000 for the, it says continued restoration of the Maranacook Food Bank. But they all,
Copy paste error there.
yeah, I see that. Yeah,
Article
because it was
29,
the Union Meeting House. Article 30 is $2,000 for Courtesy Boat Inspection Program for the Maranacook Lake Association. And Article 31 is the $1,735 to be paid to the town by the state for the Readfield Blizzard Busters Snowmobile Club to be used for trail creation and maintenance. Any question with those? Pretty simple up and down. People get a chance to vote. Any questions? Thumbs up. Good. Article 32, shall the town vote to raise and appropriate $60,000 for the unclassified budget category for the following lines: the Readfield Enterprise Fund, the Real Estate Property Revaluation, Overdraft, and Abatements. Any questions about those?
Property revaluation. It said above that that was already set aside and there will be no impact on taxes. So why is that there?
Well, we still have to spend the money to get the work done. The revenue to offset it is already in the reserves because we have been putting away $10,000 or $20,000, $10,000 a year, I think, for the last like 10 years.
So this
So
is
in other words, this is
authorizing,
one of those bank account things. The money's been set aside already, but this is just saying we now can spend some of it.
We have to have the authorization to spend.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
just the word raise and appropriate. We've already raised it, right? We just need to appropriate it. Should raise be in there? It sounds like, to me, it sounded like 25,000 more on top of what we had.
I think that's
Well,
standard.
I think we're still
language.
raising it. We're just offsetting that raising with revenue.
Yep.
So with the reserve.
With
account.
money we already have. It's not increasing the taxes this year.
What are we doing with enterprise fund? Has anybody, I think you said nobody has asked for that in years.
The last one we had was a couple years ago. COVID certainly put a damper on things. And we're actually, I think we're going to have an appointment to that committee next meeting. And we'll be able to, I think, then get more energy to
Yeah.
getting that back up and running.
So why are we appropriating 10,000 to something that?
Because
gonna be
anybody could
defunct?
apply at any time. The committee meets when people apply. So if somebody applied and we didn't have the authorization to lend to them through this article, we wouldn't be able to give them the money. So this is just authorizing us to spend money for that purpose.
But it's money that's already there.
Again, offset by the reserve accounts that we have.
Cool. Article 33 says, shall the town vote and raise $5,000 for the general assistance budget category? I think this is also another one of those, we get this number from the state, yeah?
Well, no, we base it on what our actual expenditures are, or at least
Gotcha.
what we would like them to be. We
Okay.
fall short of this because folks are fairly well served, and the state's been doing very well lately with heating
Okay.
assistance and the like.
Excellent.
But we get half of this, the 2,500, we get half back from the state
Gotcha. Okay,
If
that's
we
maybe what I
If we
remember.
spend it.
if we spend it.
Yep.
Yep.
Article 34, shall
Hold
the
on.
town, yeah.
Sorry, just we've
Yeah.
surpassed
Mhm.
our 40 minutes extension and we have 40 minutes of agenda item to go.
Yeah.
I will make a motion to
30.
extend the meeting for another 30 minutes and we're gonna honor it.
I
Yeah,
agree.
We need to curtail our current, our
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
I
second
didn't say I
it.
would like to motion. I just said let's motion.
I seconded it.
All in favor, 30-minute extension? Wonderful.
Okay.
We have, town authorized expenditure of revenues from federal state. That basically is the authorization to spend the money. Yeah.
No,
Oh,
that's if more money comes in that has not been
oh,
expected,
the revenues.
this gives
Yeah.
us permission to spend that money. So like when the ARPA funds come in, or if we get a donation from someone, we got $10,000 to the fire department last year, I think, or 2
Yeah, a
years
couple
ago.
Yeah,
yeah.
that grant.
So if we didn't have this line in there, when the fire department got that, they would not be able to use it until the following year when we had an article that said they could.
Gotcha. That's great. Good explanation. Article 35, shall the town vote to accept the following estimated revenues? This is just, again, estimated revenues, right? These are revenues for each one of these, what we call revenue sources. See that there. Any questions about this?
That's
I'm
all
gonna
based on numbers that have
move.
already existed in prior years, correct?
Yes, and some of them are being adjusted. Like I said, the state revenue sharing dropped by, I think 25,000, maybe more from what we originally thought. So that's going to be reflected next time around.
Article 36, shall the town vote to appropriate the following designated funds to reduce the tax commitment? Any questions about that one?
I have a big one on that one.
Sure, go for it.
So the new accounting method, do each of these committees know we're taking these dollar amounts out of their reserves?
Yes, but this isn't something that we're just doing. We did discuss the use of these funds with any appropriate committees, and that's kind of separate. We've always done the use of designated funds. That's not a new thing. That's not part of the accounting policy change.
So the accounting policy change, how did that come about? We had a meeting, it's like, boom, this is it, this is done. The accountant's already done their work. It seems, and I think we had the board's committee. That seemed like that would have been a really appropriate time to say, hey, this is coming. It's a new accounting situation. All these designated funds we're going to put together. I don't know, I guess that could have been a little more laid out prior to its inception.
Well, I think Eric went to every committee this year when they started planning their budget and they discussed that in person in detail, right?
Yeah, I may have missed one or two, but I think those committees had cross memberships and things like that. But yeah, we did do a kind of a traveling roadshow to all the boards and committees to talk about how this was working. We had sent out an email as well to all the chairs explaining the whole process. And they had the opportunity to comment and respond to that. And it's ongoing. We still are working on developing the policies that go with the reserve accounts. And they're going to be part of that process development as well. So I definitely understand and think that chairs meeting may have been a better opportunity, but I'm not sure when the last one of those we had. I think it might have been before we.
I think they're like, aren't they around now?
We had one a couple
Fall.
months ago,
Okay.
before the
And I
accounting thing
think
even rolled
most
out.
of the committees, when they submit their budgets, say, I know like Trails does, well, we want to use this amount of money from our reserve fund and we're going to get this amount from grants. And so we're asking the town for this amount.
Yeah.
And so this is something that's been ongoing for a couple decades.
Yeah, we are so close. Let's get to Article 37. Shall the town vote to authorize the select board to expend up to $25,000 from the unassigned fund balance in the aggregate for one or more purposes as necessary to meet contingencies that may occur during the ensuing fiscal year. Pretty self-explanatory.
I think you're gonna know what I'm gonna say
Sure,
on that one. It's like
let's hear it. I
absolutely
love it.
not.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
carte blanche, select board, you can spend up to $25,000 and not have to explain yourself.
Sure. Do you want to explain that, Eric?
I guess that's one of the things that the select board does. I don't know. I mean, we've used this, looking back, to try to explain what it's used for. We had used it for some of the work to consult for the cable franchise negotiation, which we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I guess there's things like that.
We authorized paying for the road work in the town farm forest because they couldn't get in to do the logging and.
Yeah, it was a.
The
fixed
committee
contingency for that,
hadn't
yeah.
realized in what order they needed to do requests in.
It was a temporary pass through if needed. Yeah. So there's things like that. Really, it's a fairly modest reserve that the select board has discretion over. And it is voted on, at the meetings, and the board votes on the expenditures through the warrant process. So I'm not trying to defend it. I'm just saying that's what it's for.
I
May I
guess
ask
I'm
you
just saying, again, I would rather things come to us. Anything over 13,000 just should come to us. So that's all I'm saying.
That's not what the
But-
13 is
but-
for.
But if the money is not there, we can't make it materialize out of nowhere.
There's
you
a
know-
lot of undesignated funds right here.
We can't spend them on as something that
Okay.
isn't,
Then we discuss it when it comes up.
but we don't have any money to spend. You can discuss it all you want.
I think we've got a whole lot of stuff set aside for a whole lot of things.
Well, this may be something we can marinate on
Yep.
and think about. Article 38, shall the town vote to approve $275,000 from the unassigned fund balance to reduce the total tax commitment? Questions?
What is the balance right now, Eric?
It's estimated, and I can look that up. It's actually in the summary sheet. If you go.
For the bond,
No, for the, just in general, the unassigned fund balance. I'm trying to get to it. Yeah, I gotta rotate the
so what we
page.
try to keep,
on
Steve,
my-
is 2 months of operating expenses
In the
in the bank.
bank?
So if we spend, say, 450,000, well, we spend 500,000 a month. We
So-
spend
so
300
the
and something on the
estimate-
school
Sorry.
every month. Then we would want to keep $1 million in there. And so if we ended up with 1.4 million, then we could say, well, let's spend that 0.4 million to reduce
To reduce the
taxes,
tax.
so that we don't have a lot of extra money in the bank.
Right, I was just curious what that number was.
Yeah, so right now, we always estimate at the end of the fiscal year. So right now, we're estimating out years in advance, which is
Mhm.
challenging, but we estimate around 1.2 million in that undesignated reserve. And so we're approving or looking to spend actually quite a bit more than that. I think we're up to 325 now because of the reduction in state revenue sharing and other costs that have come up. So we're actually looking at spending around 325 of that. So about a quarter.
About a quarter.
So
Yep. Are we? Oh, are you still thinking? I'm sorry.
I'm just,
I didn't realize-
could you see the wood smoke? How did you know?
Is he thinking? Is he like,
Yeah, I was
oh,
thinking, but I can hold that.
but every
No.
year money rolls back into there from our unexpended balances, so that basically we try to meet that threshold. And right now, the way things are looking, it was going to be around 116% of our minimum threshold. So we never want to go below the threshold. We also don't want to be too far above it. Usually we try to get right in there. I think that the 116% of the minimum balance seems reasonable. Although I would say, and I've said it to a few people in the past, I think that if we are in inflationary times, it makes sense to minimize the impact of cost increases and not negate them. And what we have for a budget right now actually negates the cost increases that we know are real. And so I don't know if we should be pulling as much as was currently budgeted
That was my question.
out of the reserve.
It
Yeah.
feels like, because right now, in terms of the tax impact for folks in Readfield, right?
Yep.
And I know this is up the flux because there's some estimated numbers there, but like, what's the tax impact going to be of the municipal budget?
Right now, it's
On-
budgeted the same as last year.
The same as last year?
Yeah.
With taking that much out of the reserve?
With taking that much out of the reserve.
I mean, that to me indicates that we are actually doing a fairly good job, Carol, because inflation is, pick your number, 6-8%, and we're saying we're not going to raise your taxes at all. And in reality, I wonder if we should be taking a little less out of the reserve account, because it sounds like we're taking a pretty big hunk of it, and raise the taxes a little bit. And that's going to be a real popular stance. But I still think that we might want to think about that. I mean, I feel like we actually, Eric, no, I can't say we because it ain't me, but
It's we, it's always we.
but somebody's done a pretty good job of minimizing the tax impact on the folks in town.
I think that number also makes my point that we got a whole lot of money out there that's not designated for something in the event that something goes wrong.
Well, you say it's a lot of money, but as Carol said, or Catherine said, rather,
months.
sorry, it's like we try to keep at least 2 months expense. I mean, like if you were budgeting your household, you'd want to have at least 2 months, in your bank account, right? So it's, yes, a lot of money because the town spends a lot of money, because we have a lot of people involved.
And we pay for schools.
So are we good with this? Shall
Yeah,
we
yeah.
move? Yeah, let's move on.
Well, and we have a
So,
policy about the undesignated fund and not robbing it, because again, that causes the spikes and the peaks. So if you have a select board that says, oh, well, let's just take $1 million out of
Right, and look
undesignated.
really good this year, and then
And so there's
there's,
a tax decrease
Yeah.
and people are like, oh, that's awesome. And then we have to end up borrowing money to pay our bills because we ran out. And so that's why we made a policy years ago about trying to keep a balance in there that would let us pay our bills without incurring interest charges and without having to borrow.
right, yeah.
yeah, so Article 39, 40 and 41 are all ordinance based or approval based. 39 is the land use ordinance, which is in every warrant.
Amendments.
Yep. Article 40 is the town beach ordinance, which we are getting ready to approve once we move on to that. And then Article 41 is shall the town vote to adopt the 2023 comprehensive plan for the town of Readfield.
So the copy of the ordinance attached to the warrant, have we seen that?
That's what we're looking at tonight.
Or are you talking about the land use?
Land use ordinance.
It will be a part of, yeah, there's an explanation. It gives all the land use pieces on it. Yep.
That's,
Will we
those
see
are
that?
amendments, and you'll only see that if you follow the planning board, because the planning board operates on their own by law, and they hold their own public hearings, and then they submit what they have agreed to the warrant, to the select board to be put on the warrant.
Yeah, and they are having a public hearing tomorrow night on it. And I guess what I will say is that we include that language, a copy of said ordinance attached, because it needs to be and it will be when it's legally posted. Not all this stuff is ready right now, including the beach ordinance, which we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah, did we make it all the way through?
We did.
I think we're all a little bit smarter now. We move now, thankfully, to our next item, which is to consider a proposal from 23083 is to consider the approval of commercial hauler permits. This was not in the packet, Eric.
Was that leftover?
That might have been a leftover.
Okay.
That was a leftover.
Hey, knock that 5 minutes out. New business 23092 is to consider a proposal from Girl Scout Troop 1701 for amenities at the Readfield Beach. The amenities, as described, as you can see, are some new grills and a Gaga pit.
Where is it in the packet?
It is on page.
Is it before or after the beach
Page
ordinance?
61.
It's before the beach ordinance.
61.
Is it?
No,
61.
Wait,
It was after.
I think you skipped the beach.
no, the beach is not on here.
The
Beach
beach ordinance
was-
was after the budget.
Yeah. You jumped kinda
Consider
right
the
over it.
approval of,
Something happened.
oh, I'm on the website, so hang on one second, I apologize. I was on the website looking at it. Aha, okay, it's different, so that's my fault. I was on the
Okay.
website looking, my bad, my bust. Item 23087 is to consider a second draft of the Readfield Beach ordinance. I apologize, that is what we're looking at. Again, item 23087 is the second draft of the beach ordinance. It is listed in your packet. You can find it, and I will give you a page.
I'll say
So
changes are
50.
in red.
The
50.
changes, so all the changes are in red.
Yes,
Okay.
I did not include the changes to the fee schedule and that stuff because it
Noticed.
didn't seem to make sense to do it that way. But we did make the changes that were discussed
Well,
on
because
those.
that fee schedule is not going to be in the warrant.
No, it wouldn't be.
Yeah,
Those are
it's just
just,
the
those are
ordinance,
just
all we need.
appendices.
Yep. Gotcha. Not too bad. Looks really nice. Love it. I'd entertain a motion to accept the beach ordinance.
Will the rules be part of this?
The rules would be part of the appendices.
So they
So-
would be in the warrant?
I think that, I mean, honestly, we probably would have all of this stuff in there. It would just be an electronic format. And what we normally do is we, for the posted warrants, we put the hard copy up there in their full form. But for electronic, we include a link to the documents for things like for the absentee voting and all that, folks can, they don't get a copy of the full ordinance, they get a link to it. So they can find the information.
So on the rules, I don't see where we said that the rules would be posted at the beach, which was something we talked about.
I'll have to look about that. If it's not on there, we can add it.
Okay.
Although that might have been, I thought that was addressed in the ordinance specifically about beach rules being posted at the beach.
Is that where it went in?
I think so.
Yeah, I
but
believe that's where it
I
went
don't
also.
So it would be in red then.
Should be. Let me see here.
Because I know we said
I
it,
don't
the
think
ordinance says that,
says-
you
It
know, if you
says-
violate the rules, then you, and we decided that the rules really needed to be posted so people would know what the rules were that they might be violating.
Yes.
It's-
Well, I'll make sure
These
that
rules
gets-
and regulations consistent with the ordinance shall be posted in a manner reasonably notifying town beach users.
Where is that,
In the ordinance.
where, please?
3B
Thank you.
in red.
Reasonably
Yeah.
notify. Okay,
Yay, 3B.
thank you, Sean. Thank you, Eric. So I'll make a motion to approve the beach ordinance as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the beach ordinance as written. Any questions, further
Just
discussion?
one
Yeah.
final point. I
Please.
did send this to Kristen Collins for legal review. She had very few comments
Okay.
and was accepting of this. And some of these changes are ones that she had proposed. So
Right.
we're already moving through the legal review process for this.
Yahoo. All in favor? Thank you very much. We now move on to item 23092, which is to consider a proposal from Girl Scout Troop 1701 for amenities at the Readfield Beach. Essentially, I can sort of give you an idea. You can read their proposal. Just to put it into public record, you could see this, but Girl Scout 1701 would like to use a surplus of funds that they have collected over the past few years to enhance the community of Readfield. They've discussed a few possible projects and decided on recreational improvements to the Readfield Beach. The troop plans to purchase various recreational items like cornhole, volleyball, and a portable badminton set, as well as replacing the damaged grill with a new double grill similar to the one by the picnic table. The final part is a Gaga pit, which is a new thing. Gaga's Ball is a fun, fast-paced game similar to dodgeball, but a kinder version played in a circular pit, which sounds like a contradiction. But anyway, many local schools, campgrounds, and parks have added Gaga pits to their recreational playgrounds to encourage fun group play, and this will be a fun addition to our town. So basically, we have a troop of Girl Scouts looking to improve their community. I don't want to stand in the way of that.
My only question is, it says they want to suggest to move the horseshoe pits over to accommodate the Gaga pit. So we just need to realize that that would happen.
Yeah, great. I don't think anyone's played horseshoes there, and
I don't
20
think there's
years.
horseshoes left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Them
I make a
horses are-
motion to approve this process for the Girl Scout troop and the designation of their funds.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the improvements and amenities described by Troop 1701.
Thank them.
And yes, and certainly we thank them for doing this. And is there any further discussion?
I'd just like to mention that their donation suggestion is it's going to be $1,499. So that's a significant amount of money.
Yeah, it is.
And thank you to them, and cheers to them for raising all that money and then using it this way.
Absolutely. It's a great, I think Readfield is very blessed to have an active youth sort of contingency that continues to invest in their community. We saw it when Cash won his award and donated it back to the rec project. We see it now with these young people, and I think it's a way to build a legacy of our town.
And I hope they sell Girl Scout cookies in town again this year.
That's it.
Looking forward to it.
Give me some of them Samoas. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, thank you very much. Our next item, quick, is to consider a contract renewal for the town manager, 23093. You could see the, again, also like the ordinance, the contract is in your packet. It begins on page 66. The changes are in red. You can see, as we have talked about, after we had our review, none of these things are taking us by surprise. Is there any discussion about this contract?
There were just like month changes, and I don't, like from April to January of current year, March to June. I guess I can't follow all that, but I assume.
Well, I think because we're not doing the review early enough, we wouldn't be paying a stipend in March because we're only reviewing him in March, so that it would be payable later.
And I think we said at that meeting too, for budget reasons, to move it to February so that we can plan for any potential changes in the budget.
Absolutely. That makes
Cycle.
all
Ahead of
sense.
time.
Rather than like, wait 5 months. Great. Any other questions?
I guess I'd just like to comment that the result of our review and executive session, which is because it's a personnel issue, was that the town manager is doing a fine job, that we all approve of what he's doing, and encourage him to continue doing things the way he's doing them, and had a few minor suggestions for how things could possibly be better. And so that's reflected in this contract. And we're very grateful to have Eric in town. And I think it needs to be stated that, especially given some of the tenor of things that have been going on in the town over the last several years, but especially in the last year, there was a huge show of public support at one of our select board meetings for Eric. I think that was a good way for us to judge the job that he's doing. And whether he should remain employed with us and have his contract renegotiated. There were at least 30 different residents here who spoke in his favor. So thank you, Eric, for staying with us. We really appreciate what you do for us.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to approve the contract for the town manager.
Second.
Ooh, so moved, I guess. Yes, and then I will make that motion. I will make the motion
You
to
said
accept.
that.
I will make a
But you already
motion.
said that.
I did that. It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract for the contract renewal for the town manager. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. Our next item is to consider forming an ad hoc committee to assist with franchise negotiations with Charter and to continue investigating proposed ways to improve internet service in Readfield. This is not the broadband committee. This is our ad hoc committee to talk about franchise negotiations. This happens, how frequently, Eric?
Well, I mean,
It's been a while.
It's been a while. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been expired since 2011, I think,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
2012.
I think it was a 10 or 15-year contract.
10 or 15-year contract. Then.
So it'll probably be at least 10 years.
Yeah.
So we are just, if we make the motion, we will be authorizing the ad hoc committee to be formed, meaning that we will be looking for people to join that committee and participate. That's residents when it comes time to negotiate. Okay.
2 points. I'd like to
Please.
invite the former members of the broadband committee because they discussing this piece, this cable piece, was a big part of what they did. I'd like to invite them. And I think we also have some interest from other members of the community. I'd like to invite Brent West and folks that kind of expressed some concern about the original fiber proposal, because this is a way for us to work through getting better service in town, not directly, but through the cable service provision. So I think that if the board gives some authority, we can put this out and advertise. But I would like to give you an idea that I'd be inviting. I would like to invite the former members of that committee and a few others that were involved in that discussion last year.
Outstanding. We also got I received an email from a citizen that I forwarded to Eric that saw this on the agenda and wanted to be a part of that. So people are interested.
We're also going to talk about connectivity in general, because the cable is a part of connectivity, but if there's a way to bring other broadband services to town than what was proposed in the past, this committee can also look at that.
Great.
So this would be called like a connectivity committee.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I'm really sorry. What do they want? So this is not the other project. What are they doing? Are they replacing what exactly?
The broadband committee we disbanded because the
Right,
the
but what
thing
is
failed.
what is this to do?
So,
I'm not
look
Look
following.
at the franchise agreement,
For
Spectrum, Charter,
To-
cable.
to do what with cable?
So when each person who subscribes in the town of Readfield to receive services, whether it's cable TV or internet or telephone, they are charged an additional fee. And that fee is collected by Charter and then it is paid to the town. So every subscriber pays an additional amount every month. It's listed right on your bill. And that is given to the town, and that comes to like 30,000.
30 or 35, yeah.
And so we are operating under an agreement that was a 15-year agreement that expired in 2011. And by law, they can't cancel that franchise agreement without our permission, and we can't cancel it with them without their permission. And so we need to renegotiate that now because we're expired by 12 years. So
Been a while.
And there may be opportunities to improve their coverage town-wide. So
without it costing us, hopefully.
potentially, yeah.
That's my question. Is something improving or is something expanding?
We're going to negotiate that.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's
it's
what's
part of
on-
the negotiation.
And
yeah.
that's what's on Article 9 that we just talked about, right? For Readfield TV. That's part of that franchise agreement.
That's right. Yeah,
Yes.
that's part of that.
That's
But,
where that comes from.
but so the letter to Shelley,
Winchenbach?
Winchenbach, really kind of outlines the direction we're heading. We want to understand whether or not they met the commitments of their original contract, their original franchise, and then basically put them on notice that we'd like to negotiate something different, depending on where they currently stand with that agreement. And I think that we can do better. I think that talking about getting connection to every household is going to be a big part of that discussion. But I don't know what exaction we'll have to pay for that. If anything, they might even be in a bit of a cryptic email. They kind of give us an indication that they might be looking at connecting some of those homes that are unserved already. But it's, we don't know until we get into the negotiation room with them. Yeah.
You should be on the negotiating committee. If you make that happen, you'll be a hero.
Let's just say that.
We can only hope it goes the direction of cell phones, where
I'll
everybody
make,
provides
I'll
a
make
cell
a
phone.
motion that we approve an ad hoc connectivity committee and advertise it for membership.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to form the ad hoc committee for connectivity in Readfield. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Boom. We move now to item 23095, which is closely related to our last item, but different. Consider a consulting agreement to map the extent of uncabled locations in Readfield. And I said that deliberately because it's a mouthful, but it also is doing just that. If you look on page 70, you'll see Casco Bay Advisors, and Brian Lippold is basically going to do just that. On page 71, you can see the scope of the work. Audit the infrastructure of Spectrum to determine if any changes have occurred in the uncabled areas of town since 2019, when the last audit was performed. To update the GIS data produced in 2019 to reflect any changes, and that's just the graphic map. And to update the map again to follow the utility pole lines instead of road center lines as utilized in 2019.
There's a difference currently between what Spectrum has said that they have for a number of unserved homes and what we believe there to be for unserved homes. So if we don't,
using a third party to assist and aid in our negotiations
yes,
for $1,700,
because if we
which
go
seems
out,
extremely
if
cheap.
we go
for a
out and
service
count
like
all
that.
the places that don't have cable because we know where cable ends, then we can say it's this number. This is what we're going to talk about when we negotiate.
Amen.
And if we don't do that, we have to go on what they say.
Right.
And then that doesn't serve everybody.
Think of this as verification.
So I'd make a motion to accept this proposal by Casco Bay Advisors for our mapping purposes.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept to authorize and accept the proposal of Casco Bay Advisors to map our uncabled areas and update that information. Is there any further discussion?
Yes. Don't
Yes.
we have to provide funding?
Yeah, so I would
I'll
suggest
make an amendment
yeah.
that we
that.
provide funding from the select board contingency line along with another motion to extend the meeting for another 5 minutes.
Oh, you combine those.
I-
The
okay,
amendment,
so-
no,
You can't
let me
combine
just
those.
do this.
Omnibus legislation.
The amendment to the we're going to vote on the amendment first, and the amendment is to authorize the amount in
Yes.
here, which is the fee is not to exceed $1,700. So we're amending the original motion to accept this with a fee, with an amendment that it will not exceed $1,700.
And come from the select board contingency line.
Just want to make sure everyone understands that we are voting on the amendment now. We're going to add that to the original motion. All in favor, please raise your hand. Good. Now on the floor is a motion to approve this proposal up to $1,700 and to do so out of the contingency fund of the select board. Is there any further discussion? Very well. Oh, yeah. Think about it.
Never mind.
All in favor? Thank you very much. We now have a motion on the floor to extend the meeting by 5 minutes. All in favor? Thank you. Now then, we move on to item number 23096. Consider a 6-month public safety answering point, or PSAP, service agreement. I can give you a little bit of background on this and then turn it over to Eric.
I'm good, Dennis.
What's that?
I'm good. I'm not talking.
I know, right?
And what can we say to this?
Here's what I'm going to say. Nothing. We have to
Right.
agree
So-
with this, or
Yes.
otherwise
Yeah.
people are out there. But the idea is this. There are very few dispatching centers in Maine. The one that we were originally with has now in fact kicked us out. I believe it's Somerset. We are now going to sign a temporary dispatching agreement with another dispatcher before as a way to bridge the gap between now and eventually when a more permanent dispatching solution is chosen. Does everyone understand?
They kicked out a lot of places.
Yes,
not
ma'am,
just
that is
us.
correct. Not just us. Right, right. It wasn't because we were rowdy. It was, yeah, there was a whole lot of work. So, yes. So I would ask for a motion to approve this 6-month agreement.
So moved.
There is a motion. It's been moved and it's been moved. Seconded now to consider this and to authorize a 6-month PSAP service agreement for dispatch services in Readfield. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Very well. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Have a good night.
Sandra, the sign.